All right, hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 12 of the Crackdown. Today we have one of our guests that has probably been in League of Legends the absolute longest, Jatt here. I mean, he actually, I was thinking about this as the intro was playing. He's been in League of Legends so long that when I joined Team Dignitas, which was my big break onto the scene, I actually replaced Jatt when he decided to go to, I think you were doing QA at the time for...
I was joining Riot. Yeah, because this esports thing was too risky, so I wanted to just get in with the company and get a real job.
Were you actually one of the people where, you know, some people can literally say, oh, I was one of the first 50 people to play or something. How early did you actually start playing League? Because I only know like the competitive era, and obviously it was around a couple of years more, right?
I mean, I did play in beta, but like right at the end of beta, when everyone had level 30 counts and I was level 1. So I basically played on launch.
Oh,
okay.
I remember back then, like in the scene, you know, like everyone that was like, you know, playing the game kind of knew people's backstories, and Jatt was like super famous for Guild Wars. He was like apparently the faker of Guild Wars. He was like the best Guild Wars player to ever exist, or at least that's what people would like refer to you as, like in the community.
No, Guild Wars actually was funny. The Koreans like super dominated that game really early on. I mean, this is too old school, but there's like all these like awesome Korean players, but then like ArenaNet servers got bad and the ping was too high, so all the Koreans quit. And then that's when we started dominating. Like we were.
Does that mean though that you were one of the only like NA people who actually knew that Koreans would be sick at League of Legends when they were coming? Because you know, famously, loads of them said all those weird comments like they'll always be 2 years behind or whatever. Like, did you actually know from your Guild Wars days like they're going to be sick when they come? Surely.
Yeah, you could tell. I mean, I when we went to WCG in Korea in like 2011, they hadn't even launched the Korean server yet, but you could just tell from like. It had already been embedded in the culture. Like you'd go to restaurants and you'd say like, hey, what do you do? This, you know, the server, and you'd be like, you're pro gamer. And he'd be like, oh, wow, pro gamer. And I'm like, okay, that would never happen in the US. Like you could just kind of tell.
Yeah, you were more recognized. You were more recognizable as a pro player in Korea than in North America at that time. Like you could go anywhere, and I just remember because at the time when I played in Korea, we were on OGN, right, which is like a television station in Korea. People like recognized us at restaurants and like in the airport and stuff. Where at that point I had never been recognized one time in my entire life in North America. So it's a completely like different culture over there. But one thing is like when you started playing the game back in those days, I didn't even know that a bunch of the players were Korean that were at the top of the ladder. Like you eventually found out it's like Grand Judge, Nolja, all these like super old
Lilac.
names. A Lilac, like Reaper was one of them, right? Like
RJ.
all these guys were some of the best players like on the NA server, and they were actually playing from Korea with 150 ping. I mean, I think I was so stupid at the time, like I didn't even know like about how ping really existed. Like I was just like, oh yeah, you know, like whatever, like they're not that good. And then it's like, wait, they're playing on triple my ping.
Yes.
Like maybe they are actually pretty insane.
Well, listen,
it's an amazing boomer podcast. We've gone like 13 years back already.
Listen, just to set the stage for people, and I'm not dissing any of these people, but there were players, I'll just say they were in CLG if that helps. Some of the CLG players, no joke, back in the day, did try to tell me before they played like the actual lands against these guys, like, oh no, like Mac Noon, I fucking wrecked that guy. I was like, he's on 120 ping. They were like, no, the game's the game. You know, the decisions he was making was wrong. Like, and this guy was like the best fucking top player in the world at one point in time. Like, some of those American players were ridiculous back then. Like, because that's how you know how legit Koreans are. That you'd play a game and like still try really hard on 120 ping when you know you got like a mad disadvantage. They must have just loved playing the game. To be fair, respect.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. I think Magnoon was one of those players who, like, sometimes there's players that really exceed your expectations where, like, normally I feel like when I see a player originally, I have, like, an idea of, like, where their limit is or, like, how good they're going to be. But Magnoon, he started as, like, somebody who was just, like, a Pantheon, like, one trick. He was a Pantheon LeBlanc, like, two trick pretty much at the time. And he just didn't look like he would ever be the type of player that would be that insane. And then somehow he was just able to, like, transition those skills, which looked like he played every single champion like Pantheon at the time. Like, that was kind of, like, the vibe that you got when you watch him, where it's like, oh, he, like, no matter what he plays, it always looks like he's playing Pantheon. He's, like, trying to go for these, like, ridiculous roam plays. He's playing super aggressive. So it was really crazy to see a player like that transition and then just be, like, super, like, mechanically, like, refined. I felt like that was something that's super strange. There's a bunch of players like that, though, that end up being insanely good that you would never expect. One of them that I always mention is Blabber, because for a while he was literally just hard stuck like low challenger on NA server with like 2,000 games. Like it wasn't like he was one of these people that was like one of these mechanical freaks that you're like, damn, this guy like is gonna be good. He was one of those players that always was like really like it just looked like he was super limited, and then he ended up being insane. So I guess you can never really know. I mean, those were the days.
You break through. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing that I wanted to just bring up on the show, I was saying that we were going to bring it up at some point, but why not just bring it up now? Would be your just like transition through different roles in your career, because I feel like you've kind of been on all sides of it, right? Like you were a caster, like obviously you're a pro player first, then a caster, then you worked like briefly like in the game development side of things, and then you came into coaching. So like how did you decide to like make all these transitions in your career? Like was it stuff where you felt like like you needed to make a transition, or was it always just like, oh, you felt like you had the luxury of like being able to go back to other things that you had done if new things didn't work out?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, right? Because every decision is going to be a little bit different, and I'll try and be a little quick and still do it justice. Like, I'm lucky in the fact that I like am still, honestly, I'm way older than a lot of people realize. Like I'm 33 at this point. Because like I have been around for a long time, playing Guild Wars a whole bunch. I think I was on Dig when you replaced me on Dig, I think I was like 24 already. So that would have put me at like one of the oldest pro players at the time. Yep. And like then I joined Riot. So I just every decision is like a mix of short term and long term, and then like a little bit of passion. So originally when I started playing League, like it was literally just for fun. Guild Wars was a dying game. I came over with a bunch of friends. I think our ability to play as a team let me improve a lot faster than other players that were just stuck in like solo duo queue. And then I used that like teamwork and shot calling skill to like scout out Scar and Voyboy, who were the two of the best laners in like the whole NA server. And I was like, hey, if you have good lanes and you want to understand what to do as a jungler, like it'll work. So I was like one of the bigger shot callers on like the early Dig days for the like 3 or 4 months that I actually played there in tournaments, and we like won IPL3 and stuff. But at the same time, like I was this 24-year-old dude. We won IPL3. I got $2,200 like 6 months after the tournament. That's not exactly like a living wage for a mid-20s dude. So that's why I was kind of motivated to find some sort of stability. I had a job as an electronic engineer tech. I was considering like a salaried offer in like, I think Prince George in BC, which is just the coldest, like one of the colder places. And like that was either going to be my life, or I do something in this gaming space. And at the time I didn't really see actually a very clear path to actually staying on Dig and being a gamer, because everyone else on the team was like, I think Voyboy was 15 or 16 at the time. Scar was like 20, or like everyone else was
and
just
the team never practiced. That's another thing that's
totally. Because Voyboy was
you couldn't play with Voyboy, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that's so undersold about Dignitas is like the fact that the team was that good with zero practice was like a miracle, because other teams like TSM was a team that had like a gaming house, and they were like practicing against European teams and then also NA teams. They were practicing against CLG all the time. And Dig was a team that, no joke, never practiced because it was impossible, because Voyboy was an IB student.
We got like a few scrims in. Yep. And Voyboy wouldn't be allowed to talk because his PC was in his parents' room.
Yep.
So that was fun. Or it was in like the living room, and his dad would get mad if he would talk. Anyway, so from there, it's like I networked a little bit at some of the LAN events and kind of found a way to get job interviews at Riot to be a QA analyst, because like it's more exciting than being electronic engineer tech to actually work on like the balance of a game. And when I had been playing Guild Wars, I had really strong opinions about balance and actually communicated a bunch with the designers there. One of them was Morello, who actually worked for Riot. So like I actually had a little bit of a relationship with him that could get me in, like helped me get into Riot a little bit for sure. And that was just going to be like a more stable job. So that's when I told Dig that I was going to do this thing. And this was in like, I don't know, December or January of 2012. And I was like, we should probably look for another jungler. I actually left Dig before I even got accepted. I was like pretty confident I'd be able to make it in, but I didn't want to screw over the team, because you guys are going to end up going to Kiev. This is good. Hopefully not take too long.
Anyway, in chat, by the way.
Yeah. I did that. Oh, there's Odie. And I also told Odie, and he told me I should take the job. I think ultimately that was good advice. So I did that. And originally when I joined, I actually wanted to balance the game because that's what I thought was like making it. But after I joined in February of 2012, Dustin Beck joined the company, and he was going to be like the VP of Esports, and he had this idea to start the LCS. And he's like, we're going to need like full-time casters, and we're going to have a league. And in the back of my head, I was like, motherfucker, like I could have just stayed on Dig and I could be a pro player, but this would have waited like a year. But like I was out of it. I was enjoying time at Riot. I'd done a little bit of casting with D-Man from like the online events that were happening in season 2, and kind of liked it. So that was the first decision was more difficult of like, what can I add to, like, what is my value going to be as a QA analyst who's trying to become a game designer? There's actually probably a ton of people who can do that as well, if not better than me. Like, it's a passion of mine, but there's tons of people that are going to be better than me at this. Whereas being a caster, I actually felt at the time that I was pretty uniquely qualified to be the best at that and make a difference. Yep. Because
you're the best player that ever did it.
I actually had former pro experience, which like no one did because pro existed for like a year. I had a sports background where I'd played basketball, football, growing up, and I devoured commentary from pro sports and like was pretty good at talking. So I'm like, I understood the play-by-play color dynamic. I understood all that stuff. So I felt like I could kind of slot in pretty well. So like, that's why I did that, because game design originally was going to be average. Casting, I could actually be great. So I did that. Did that for 7 years. And then I decided to change something up.
I mean, for me, I think the craziest move that you made was from casting, because casting was something that you had like established yourself as, you know, one of the best at. I mean, you were getting all like the biggest like events, like you'd always get like the finals, semifinals, like whatever. You'd always get like the most opportune casting gigs, like English speaking worldwide. So making that transition and going back to balance, like how did you decide to work more on the game? Because I mean, like you just said, you thought that there was like other people that would be potentially even better than you at game design. So it doesn't like really make sense to me that you would actually look for that move like when you had already been really like knocking it out of the park as a caster.
Yeah, I mean, fair. But so what I kind of reestablished my thought process from back in 2013 when I originally like left the team, and I also had an opportunity to jump back in at a higher level. So when I left in 2012, I was a QA analyst, and basically the path there would be switch over to the design discipline as like a junior designer, and then maybe you can get to become a mid-level designer, and then it's like junior, mid-level, senior, and then you'll have like a meddler or a like scruffy, like Mark Yetter, who's like above that. And what it was is like it was an opportunity to interview for a mid-level game designer. So it's like I've kind of, even though I haven't been working in that vertical, because I've spent so much time with League, like I basically had an opportunity to jump in at like a higher level of game design than I would have previously been in 2012. But then also part of the reason that I cast in the first place was because I thought I was uniquely qualified to be like the best at something. And I felt like I was actually quite necessary for the success of like, maybe this is
as a whole
ego, like esports in the West. Because like I felt like I could bring that. But then after doing it for 7 years, there are like so many other good casters that can still carry, right? Kobe, Deficio, Vedius, Zale, Quickshot, Freak, like everyone had leveled up so much that I didn't feel like I was as necessary anymore. Even though like I still really fucking enjoyed it, and I undervalued how much that I enjoyed it, which is why I switched back afterwards. But I just felt more free to kind of pursue a passion of something I might have missed out in 7 years ago. So I just, you know, maybe it's like a quarter life crisis type thing. Like, oh, like what could have been? Let me go do that. So then I did that for like seven months. Actually enjoyed it, but I realized how much I missed casting, which is why I eventually went back in late 2019. Yeah.
Did you have as much agency as you expected? Like when you started like balancing the game again, like was it like harder to get things done that you're like push things through that you wanted pushed through, or like how was the overall experience?
I got to do a lot, actually. I wasn't unhappy with the amount of agency that I had. I think the most difficult thing for me actually was, and maybe this is like a boring answer, but like the technical part of the job was harder than I anticipated to learn. like actually implementing any type of complex change. So like doing numbers is really easy and fast, and you can kind of conceptualize it and brainstorm. But if you actually want to change the function of an ability, that just takes a lot of raw technical skill. So what another designer would like, certainly T would be able to do in like 30 minutes would take me like 4.5 hours. Right. So it just took me too long to do a lot of that stuff, which slowed down my pace of work. But like things that some people don't understand, I think, about game balance is how quickly you actually have to make most game balance decisions on a patch to patch basis in order to make the game feel good, just because of the nature of actually changing code and shipping patches and not having the game break. In order to actually react from a patch to patch, you have like a day or two, because you need every 2 weeks they patch, but you need to run the patch for a certain amount of time to get a sample set. And then you need to lock in your changes really quickly so that everything can get stable before they ship it. So most games would have like a 3-week or a month-long lag, and Riot used to like 7 years ago. But when I was on the team, we were able to do patch-to-patch changes, which meant like 3/4 of the patch is actually done in like a day or two. So that was always like a burst of work that we'd have to do when doing patch notes.
Can you actually tell us any of the things that like you tried to implement, whether it's like a vague overview or some specifics if you want?
Yeah, fuck. Yes.
I remember specifically you were the one that like pushed back the crab changes from like the 2 minute to like 3:15, right? I remember you messaging, like that was one thing that I liked about you being on the team, is you actually like would reach out to like a bunch of like the streamers and like pro players and stuff and try to like sample everything, so you'd have the data to like go through. It's like, yeah, I mean, this is something that like was thoroughly thought out. Like I feel like sometimes like there isn't enough surveying done of like the highest level players. I mean, I guess that's just my personal experience where like
highest level players like IWillDominate lol.
To be fair, Dom, if you want, we can get into that topic, because I do think that is a classic topic that if you have anyone who was involved in game design, you should talk about, which is like, look, here's the problem, right? I complain about balance all the time myself, because let's face it, first of all, it's just a fun thing to do, like water cooler talk, like, oh, this is broken, that's shit, you know. It's a fun thing to do anyway, it's just grumbling in it. But even if you make real, legitimate arguments, the main problem, as far as I can tell, goes like this. First of all, say it's someone like me, and I'm just watching the game, and basically what's frustrating me is I don't like how like a pro player's abusing something. So he's actually abusing it to an extent I'd probably never meet if I played low-level League of Legends solo queue, actually. So I'm already going to overreact to what the actual totality of the impact of the OP thing is. Then if you do it, Dom, you're also reacting to the fact that you play the game at a high level, so you're getting frustrated at certain things. But again, you're in a super small niche of people. Like a lot of people aren't even seeing it to that degree. So one of the problems is when we come and bring our comments to the people who are in game design, etc., or talk to Riot, or even just like speak to Riot without like a direct connection on the internet and hope they get the message. First of all, we are going to do it from frustration. So we're going to do it in such a hostile tone. Unfortunately, it doesn't like welcome people in to go, oh, I want to listen to this guy. If anything, you want to be like,
you got a Tyler one stream. Yeah. He's like, you know, yeah, this game is fucking dog shit, and everyone at Riot is an idiot. Yeah. And Jatt's like, okay, thank you, noted. All right, let's see.
And then the other one is kind of along the lines of what he said about how like you have to like lock in changes and you have to figure out like one of the hardest things about the game design is that you aren't ever changing one thing. Changing one thing changes every other thing that interacts with that, including all the other champions, like concepts like which is stronger. Like I'll give you an example. You know, famously, one of the reasons why people kept going on and on about how Genja was a Time Lord is because when he played the Trinity Force Cogmore, when it wasn't good, it was actually good, like something mad, like 4 or 5 months later, but without changes totally. And I believe it was because like some other item got nerfed or some other champions got nerfed, and that just made it by de facto. They got taken down, and it was just good then at that point.
Yeah,
like, that's confusing to a fan. Buffs. Yeah, that's confusing to a fan. So basically, as far as I can tell, a lot of the things that like I might ask for individually for one champion, it's like whack-a-mole, mate. If I back that over there, I don't know what the effect is over here. Maybe it makes something else OP that might be even worse. So I'd like to hear some of Jatt's thoughts on this, because I know it's a lot easier to basically say like, this is broken, than it is to actually know how would I fix it, you know?
Yeah, it's like, oh man, it's kind of absurd how much you want to take into account. I was reading chat as well, so like I did a decent amount of outreach with like the network that I had, not to necessarily let people like dictate what was being changed, but more if I needed to just like gain information or gain context. So if we were trying to nerf like Tom Kench for pro play, trying to find out the things that are like uniquely strong about him in pro without making him unplayable in solo queue. So I'd talk to like Wadid or something, because at the time he had been like one of the best Tom Kench players. Or like I talked to you about Scuttle Crab. Sometimes people are like, oh, LS talked to Riot. Like I actually did talk to LS about certain things sometimes for game balance stuff. In an answer of how much stuff did I actually work on? If you look at any patch from about like January, February to July of 2019, I'd say like a third of the changes would have been me.
Okay.
So, and that's in terms of like number stuff, because you have to kind of realize there's different scopes of design work. The live design team is really at the end of the line, and they're mainly like maintaining the game.
Right.
Because there's so much animation and like core kit design and theme and all that stuff that happens like way earlier on from like a champion design level. They build up like a new champion. There's play testing to get all those levers tuned and all that stuff. And then like the stuff that the live design team does is mostly maintenance and balance work, which is just numbers tuning. And then occasionally they'll take on larger like mini rubric projects that don't require assets. So like one of the hardest changes that I had to do, which is the least popular one right before I left, was Galio. Because everyone was
the patch where his Q like one-shot you, or was?
No. This was the patch where I didn't let you flash while charging W.
Mm-hmm.
Because and this takes context, and I think it answers Thorn's question earlier. One thing I communicated while I was on the team, it's a Reddit thread called "How Powered is Riven." Do you remember seeing this?
No.
2 years ago.
What's the premise?
Yeah, so basically at the time 2 years ago, everyone in NA was just talking about how blatantly OP Riven was and how it's so stupid that Riot hasn't nerfed him after this many patches. And they'd be like, he's got a 56% win rate in Masters Plus and this ban rate and blah, blah, blah. And you have to take into account not only a global context, but also a context of where the champion is good. And this is something that the team was actually trying to work on while I was there. So I was like a decent part in making what we call like the balance framework at the time. So it was like me at the time, Riot Repertoire was leading the team. Then we had like Riot Soter, Captain Gameplay, I don't remember what his name is, like any of the designers on the live design team at the time. Because instead of just using like your gut of like, what are we actually balancing for? Are we balancing for plat? Are we balancing for gold? Are we balancing for silver? Are we balancing for pro? What this framework does is it's like trying to balance for everyone. So we decided on 4 different tiers of play. There's pro, there's elite, there's skilled, and there's average. And you actually see this in the patch notes now. So if you go to like the newer patch notes, like what was the most recent patch 11.9?
I like how the lowest one is average. Like there's no like bad, there's no like dog shit. Like the lowest one is average.
In your country, imagine getting there and using a translator and going, so the small is regular.
Yeah.
Same thing, you know what I mean?
Just
saying,
it's the McDonald's of balance changes. Perfect.
Yeah.
Nice.
At some point, we're like majority. It's like, well, let's find a name that works. But yeah, Dom, if you go to the 11.9 patch notes, and like people watching can do this now, they color code all the changes. Pro is yellow, elite is red, skilled is blue, and average is like orange. And then when they nerf, they actually have the color next to the champion for why it was nerfed.
Dude, you know what's crazy about that? I've never ever seen anyone ever bring that context up. Now listen, I'm not like a patch notes guy, but I know a lot of the really good people in the scene. I know I've never seen anyone reference it ever. Is it not known or something?
It's been posted like 2 or 3 times online, but it's so hard to transfer information in the world today.
There's a key. I didn't even know that. Like I've looked at this so many times and did patch note rundowns. I didn't even realize that there was like a champion thing, but it's only for nerfs, right? Like it says that there's a key for nerfs, but for buffs, it doesn't say like why things were buffed. Isn't that
usually? So it can, but that depends on like your designers still have agency in what they buff if they want to. So the way the system is designed to work is it's to make sure that every champion in the game is playable, but no champion in the game is overpowered. So what we did is we defined in all 4 tiers what overpowered means. And we defined in all 4 tiers what weak means. So if a champion is weak in all 4 tiers, they must be buffed.
Right.
If a champion is OP in any tier, they must be nerfed. Right?
That's crazy though. Like, I feel like that's really hard because for any tier, that means that there's going to be a lot of champions that will never be able to see the light of pro play because they'll just be like noob stompers.
That's exactly the problem.
I mean, isn't that basically why Katarina is just like almost never in pro play, Dom? Because like the fucking
I'm a fucking Shaco man.
Don't they?
Like I'm a Shaco man. I haven't seen one Shaco in a long ass time.
And this is the thing, Dom. That makes for more difficult design problems when you have the time to do it. So Galio, right before I left, was one of the harder ones because this guy, this fucking champ, was 42% win rate, like 43% win rate, which the definition at the time, I don't remember, it's been updated if you Google it, is like either you have to be a certain pick ban percentage in pro to be considered okay, you need to be a certain play rate in like Diamond 2 to Challenger, or you need to be a certain win rate in skilled or average. But that win rate's like 48% or something.
Yep.
Right? And Galio was, if he's ever like buffed above at the time like 43% win rate, he'd be like perma pick ban in pro because you can, in my opinion, you could zone so much by just pressing W and moving and threatening with your flash. And I'm like, this like flash discipline and the use of these cooldowns matters so much more in a pro game than it does for a solo queue player to take advantage of. So in my opinion, there was just no way he could ever be like actually balanced across 4 tiers with this mechanic existing. But that's still like a really controversial change because it was like core to the way a lot of people play Galio, and they thought they'll never be able to play him if you can't do this trick.
There's a lot of changes like that though that like are fundamental changes to the champion that there's always a huge knee-jerk reaction, like myself included. Like I'll see something like that and I'll be like, well, this champion's unplayable now. Like Galio's the worst champion of the game. And then you'll play, it's like, wait, it actually is fine. Like it's still pretty good.
The best one ever. I always think of this, right? Because one thing people take for granted is that when players are great in the past, obviously technically they're slightly worse mechanically and we don't know concepts about the game. So when you think about how OP Faker was in season 3 on the old LeBlanc, dude, if they hadn't nerfed that a million times, like what the hell would everyone be doing now on that champion? It would be the most OP shit of all time. Like, imagine players like Caps today on the old LeBlanc. Like, basically, if you think it's bad now where, like, certain roles are stronger, it'd be a nightmare trying to be, like, a top laner or a fucking AD carrier.
You'd be perma-silenced.
Yeah.
You get one shot with a DFG. Like.
It was so OP. I mean, not in context at the time, but now it would be insane, wouldn't it? But, again, even though they nerfed it, it still can't get played year after year after year.
Yeah. So anyway, after that mechanic was changed, I didn't put enough buffs into him, and he ended up being actually like weak in all 4 tiers. And then later they buffed a few other things, like they changed his passive
taunt range, I think, too, right?
Yeah, and yeah, I think taunt range stayed the same, but he was slowed less during the taunt. That was one of my changes, so you could actually like walk at people with like Predator or something. But anyway, like Galio exists in a balanced state now. He's actually one champ that can be considered balanced in like all 4 tiers because he's picked in pro, he's occasionally picked in elite, and he has good win rates in average and skilled. So he's like a balanced champion across all 4 tiers now. But that also runs in contrast with like other design principles, like, is he still fun, right? Are people still playing him? So that's the type of stuff that makes the job really hard. But there actually is logic to a lot of this stuff. And usually when you see a champion like get murdered, it's in an attempt to make it balanceable. Between tiers. Otherwise, like it's not ideal to have a champ that's like only ever going to be a pro pick and will be weak in the other 3 tiers.
It's like an abusive relationship with the champion. They got to break you down before they can build you up.
A little bit. And you try and do it all in one like shotgun, but you're changing so much, it's tricky.
Yeah. I just like I thought about this when we were talking right now. What's your take on the current balance of the game in current day? Because I mean, a lot of people have been complaining about like the stale meta, and you know there's been conversations on Reddit whether it's like are pro teams not being like as forward thinking as possible? Are they locking themselves too much into that meta? Is the meta actually that solidified where it's like Udyr and Hecarim are the only pickable champions at pro play? Like what's your overall take on the balance of the game right now?
I mean, we definitely, so here's a funny quirk. We played more scrims on patch 11.5 than we did in the entire spring split regular season.
Yeah, that made no sense. Like everyone knows that made no sense when you're just looking at it. Like ever since Perks brought that up, people were like, wait, so everyone else plays on 11.6, but NA is just on 11.5 for like all of eternity. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it made sense based on the rules of the system. You wait 2 weeks after a patch before putting it into pro play. And when you start playoffs, you lock the patch. But the way the schedule fell is for week 6, we were on 11.5. And then week 1 of the playoffs wasn't 2 weeks after. So we couldn't start playoffs on 11.6. But then they had a format where playoffs runs for a month. So what happens is we're just on the same patch for 6 weeks.
Yeah, and the criticism was obviously that there should have been that 1 week break before the first round of playoffs. So
yeah, I mean, I actually didn't have that many complaints about the meta this year. I thought actually the game ended up being pretty diverse. A lot of the really OP stuff, like Seraphine, was always like debatably OP because not everyone unanimously picked it up. So there was a lot of those like really weird champions that required you to put a lot of games into playing it in order to harness the power. But like, what do you think actually? Because you've been on the scrim side of it. I think a lot of people don't credit or like recognize how difficult it actually is to add a champion into a pool.
Hold on.
What do you think about that?
I think Thorin might have. Yeah, I think we might have lost Thorin for a second. Hold on. Let me try recalling real quick, and then I'll answer this. Let's see. Waiting on Thorin. Maybe I can try changing the server. Actually, sometimes this works. Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really hard to work new things. And just to answer your question, since it was directed at me, we can answer it while Thorin's trying to reconnect. But yeah, I think that's the thing that normally there's an issue with is like you can't change everything at one time, right? Like not everyone can practice like everything all the time, so you have to kind of like divide your scrims up and like what are our like controls and what are our variables for like this set. And you know, a lot of the time it's really just dependent on like what you think the team needs. So I don't know. I think that it's really tough. But I will say that I think that there was a lack of innovation in the West, because we saw a lot of like the other picks being played. I mean, I saw Nidalee coming back at least in NA. Like it seemed like that became a permaban. So at least there was like because we didn't see that much of it. I assumed that it was just really fucking good in scrims, and then you know people just felt like it needed to be permad. I just feel like there were things that like that were fine into Hecarim and Udyr, but the problem was no jungler ever wants to be behind ever. So if you're like down one camp when you get to that first crab, you're like, the game is over, it's lost, like we can't contest, like we just have to sack everything. And I think it was like too much of like a knee-jerk reaction to that specifically. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I completely agree with like the way that things have been like balanced. It seems like the approach in this season has been to like buff other things to match like the clear speed of Udyr and Hecarim. So like they buff Morgana clear speed and like Diana clear speed and all this stuff. And you know, one of the things that they said in the patch notes is they were trying to like bring these champions into the jungle, and it seemed like my perception of it was that jungle was starting to be an underplayed role. People did not play jungle as much as before, and their way of balancing the game was like, what we'll do is we'll make a bunch of other champions viable in the jungle, so that if you're like a Morgana main or a Diana main, now instead of playing mid, you play like jungle, or like instead of playing support, you play jungle. So that like more people were just like kind of like artificially like forced into the role. But yeah, I mean, I just think that in general, like the full clear meta and stuff, I think that it's kind of brain dead compared to other metas. And like for me, I think that it's not as like fun to play or to watch, because I feel like you can't really see that many of the decisions in the early game. I mean, there's a lot of decisions later on, but like early game, it seems like everyone kind of like had it down to a T, which becomes like a lot less interesting from a viewing perspective.
And I guess there's like two problems there, right? Because there's like a systemic problem with the popularity of the jungle position, where like everyone knows now if you Q fill, you get jungle. And it didn't always used to be that way. Like it used to be you Q fill, you get support. So that's kind of like they swapped now. So I actually don't disagree with that like Band-Aid solution of it. Let's because there's different types of players. There's man, we are going way off topic of what I thought this episode was going to be. But this
is the whole point of the Crackdown, man. We just talk about whatever's interesting.
There's like one-trick players who love their champions and play their champions, and then there's role players who like love their role and play their role. The jungle role is bad. You can try and do a deep dive and like fundamentally change the way the jungle works. But usually, like if you're being responsible, you only ever ship those changes in off season, like for a new season of patch.
So you don't reinvent like the concept of the role, basically, yeah.
Yeah. So I think what Riot is probably doing in this case is they're like, let's try and get all the Morgana players and move them to the jungle because this is an underpopulated position in our queues. So like, I love that approach as a band-aid, but I actually agree with you. I hate jungle right now. And I think
I didn't say that, but yeah, sure. Let's say.
Mate, this reminds me of that classic scene in the movie fucking Braveheart, which is a banger movie if no one's ever watched it from the 90s, right? Okay. And it has that scene in it where one of the best things about that movie is one thing I appreciate about you Americans is back after once the Cold War ended and you couldn't just make every fucking bad guy like a ridiculous guy like. You Americans just fucking scum pig dog. Once you couldn't do that guy, you just went to the old classic, which is the British bastard, right? So you bring in the old guy, the regal British guy, because you're all just imagining like, oh, it's fucking King George. Like
you're literally describing your position on the show.
You remember? It is. That is literally the role I play. I know what I'm doing, Dom. So basically, if you remember in this movie, they have that character Edward he's King Longshanks, right? And he's like the biggest douche of all time as a king because he's just like exactly what you wouldn't want a king. Like he just rules with an iron fist, and as a result, he has all these like incredible lines that are just the most douchey way to say anything. So there's a famous part in it, right, where he says something or other like, oh, you know, like the like someone says something like, sir, we need to move our archers into position, and he goes, arrows cost money, send the Irish. Now, that's just basically what Riot's doing here. What they're going is they're going, Dom, changes cost money. Send the Morgana players. That's just their solution now. There's a role to be filled. There's some dirty work to be done. Bring the fucking Morgana players in. There you go.
Yeah, the Morgana players.
No,
welcome to the Crackdown, Jatt. This is a different type of show, mate. This is
think about it. The solution would be like, find the popular champion, the cat jungle. Like, if they really want to fix this, like, let's make Yasuo a jungler. Like, you're set, right? And suddenly the queue is popular again.
I think the interesting thing though is, to me, I feel like they're sometimes like, I feel like really poor at predicting what changes are actually going to have the effects on the game that they're desiring, because like for me it seemed like Rumble was kind of left out. Like Rumble's got buffs, like the attack speed buffs, but they didn't phrase them the same way they phrased the Morgana and the Diana buffs. Like the Morgana and Diana buffs were like specifically like jungle focused buffs. I don't think they realized how much the Rumble buffs were going to affect him and just like shove him into the jungle, because I actually think that's the best jungler, the most viable one out of all of them.
He's good.
Yeah, he's broken.
MSI is actually going to be kind of crazy. Like, I think the meta is so much different now than it was on 11.5. I haven't seen enough of 11.9, like Diana and Morg and Rumble and even like Vladimir, but all those champions are like huge meta disruptors for MSI patch. So I like, and especially with the nerfs they did to like Chem Tank and stuff, I don't think MSI will be Uter Hecarim, even if it was stuck there for a while. My issue with jungle is, I think, man, why am I even talking about this? I think catch-up experience should come back.
Yep.
I think that's actually what's driving all of this.
So that people don't get punished for ganks, basically, and don't have to just keep full clearing. Is that the logic?
It's just, people vastly underestimate how much opportunity cost there is to ganking now.
Yes.
It's like over top. And also at like a high pro level. It's kind of absurd with how important it is to be able to cycle your camps. One gank where you throw off your cycle is just going to multiply throughout the game to become worse and worse.
And it goes without saying the laners don't understand these concepts often, so they're still asking you to come and gank all the time.
Yeah. But if you like look at jungle proximity stats across the world, they're lower than they've ever been. Like pro junglers are ganking less than ever. And I don't think many people have consciously realized it's because of jungle experience, but like I think it is. I think that's also why like Worlds, I don't think people realize this, and I didn't realize this fully until Worlds last year, when like it really became like the Lilia like full clear power farm jungle meta, and the teams that did this well were the teams that succeeded. Like you can find sparse amounts of success with like the Volibear set ganking stuff back at Worlds, but really the teams that understood full clear jungle were like actually just the best teams in the world.
Yep. Like Dom. I mean, they played around their jungler more than ever. I just think that it's not what the jungle like position I envision. Like I think
it's actually not that creative.
Yeah, like, so from my perspective, I don't think the jungle position is supposed to be like a carry position. It's supposed to be like a facilitator, just in general for the game. And like, I think the jungle is like overpowered in the fact that you're too strong at points of the game compared to like other people. Like when you enter a dragon fight at like 20 minutes into the game, there's no way that you should be the highest level in the game. Like that just shouldn't happen a lot of the time. Like, so I think that the jungle is like overpowered in that sense, but I actually don't like the way that it's overpowered because like the other team has a jungler too. So he's ahead and you're ahead, but there's not like, for me, what I want to see is like more skill expression where like, if you're better than the enemy, you have more opportunities to like put them behind. And I guess like originally one thing I wanted to say is like, I was really against catch-up experience being in the game at the degree it was earlier on. Like, I think that it was just way too high. Like people would just fall like 2 levels behind and then like clear 2 camps and they'd be even. It would be like, what the fuck just happened? Like, where'd my whole lead go? Like, that's not fulfilling either, but there should be like some level of catch-up experience, or they need to just change the level timers. Because I feel like if you full clear and you're just enough to hit level 4, then there's like that distinct advantage when you get to that 315 crab where it's like everyone's gonna have to need to be level 4. But if like, let's say you're level 3, like a full clear is no longer level 4, you're level 3, well then it doesn't matter if you're like, you know, 1 camp down. If you're both level 3, then you're going to come in
both
on
can
like,
go contest, right?
Yeah, you'd be at like even footing.
Because otherwise, essentially, it's just a timer on which champion gets to the full clear to 4 first. Yeah, there's no skill in that, is there?
Not in my opinion.
Yeah. It is, that's a change that had like, I just think a huge number of ripple effects. Maybe the level 4 thing would make a difference. Do you know catch-up experience actually still exists, like with champion kills?
Yeah, it's champion kills, and then isn't it also on dragons too? Like I thought that
champion kills and assists, and it might still be on dragons. It's just not on normal jungle camps anymore. Okay. So I don't know. Game's really complicated.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have a favorite meta? Obviously, it doesn't have to be one you worked on, but is there like a meta for you that is like the golden one where, again, nothing's perfect, but, you know, it was fair and balanced on
he's got Santorin on his team now. He's going to talk about level 2 ganking. Red buff to ganking the opposite side of the map. That's going to be his favorite.
The dream. Ardent Sensor. No.
Wow. Jesus.
No, definitely not. I think this one will be anyone who answers this question, it'll be colored by nostalgia. It's kind of like it's kind of like the theory I have on everyone's favorite movie. It's like, usually everyone's favorite movie is the first great movie they saw.
It's when you're like 12 or 15 or something, isn't it? Yeah.
Literally after that, they're just like, oh yeah, that's not my favorite movie.
Of course.
Okay. So favorite meta.
I mean, I can answer this easily. Season 4 jungle meta. Like, I loved playing that meta in LCS. Like, I thought it was so.
Rengar.
Wasn't S6 when they were the strongest? Like, what was the strongest? jungle meta?
So season 6 was when it was the strongest. It was like Strength of the Aegis. But I had the same problems with season 6 jungle meta as I have with now, where it's like before it was like you had to play Nidalee Graves and like full clear, and then you like need to stack your Strength of the Aegis as fast as possible, and like the pathing was really stale. Like, I like when you have like varied pathing. I always enjoy watching players that are really smart about pathing. It's why I always liked watching like Meteos, even in like season 9, even his later days when like all the mechanics.
Was a genius, wasn't he?
Yeah, even when like the mechanics weren't there anymore, like he would just take creative gank angles that other people wouldn't think of and like be able to get high impact kills on the map. And like I just really appreciate that as a jungler. Like that was,
sometimes on the fly, even, you know, like you could switch it up. There's so many options, wasn't there?
Yeah, exactly. I think that that's just like beautiful to watch. So in season 4, I just loved playing that meta, especially in like pro play, because it was like Elise, Lee Sin, Eve, Rengar, kha'zix, Jarvan, like all these champions had the ability to fight early. Yes. And then they also like had a lot of impact and a lot of varied pathing. So like you'd see a lot of like the intelligence behind like jungle players in the game, where I just feel like some of that is like kind of been lacking recently, where it's like more about like refining your mechanics rather than like being really, really smart.
Yeah. So this is, you made me think of another issue with trying to find like, I'm not even going to say favorite meta Thorn. I'm going to say like favorite jungle meta. I think the problem with the jungle system is it's a PvE system at heart with like some PvP interactions. So it's actually like pretty solvable over a long period of time. And then once it's solvable, it's stale. But once you get the optimal aspect of the PvE part, everyone's just going to do that. Yeah. And then once you disrupt this system, then you're also churning your jungle players because people hate relearning new stuff. Yes, of course. So you're stuck on both ends. And it's like, it's actually a really difficult problem to solve, I think, design-wise, which is maybe why jungle feels like bad right now. Because we're, like 11 years into this jungle thing? Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I think the best one was whenever, and this is the weird thing saying it now because I hated the mechanic at the time, but Dom, do you remember the conservation mechanic on Smite?
Yep.
Yeah. I think that was the best.
Yep.
I think that was the best like solve to this problem where and the
you can explain it for the viewers real quick.
I don't even remember exactly how it worked, but it was if you didn't smite for like a period of time, your next smite was more rewarding.
Yeah, like so it gave you more gold.
It gave you like a cushion of time with which you could pull off successful ganks, and slightly punished power farming, but also punished over ganking because you had an optimal timer to hit of mix between ganking and farming.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, so essentially the way it worked was like you had an amount of like gold on your smite. So like once you hit a like I think it was like 60 or something, like it would go up. So it'd be like every second you'd get like 1 gold worth of conservation, and then it would cap at 60 seconds. So if you sat in a bush for a minute and a half, that last 30 seconds you weren't actually you're wasting like potentially 30 gold. But if you were able to execute a gank and then go back to the jungle, you'd actually get the response. I think that was actually like a really really good meta. Damn, so season 3 was the jungle meta.
Maybe. Maybe season 3.
The Nasus Vi meta. that was
season 3 was when you could still place a billion wards as well. That's when it really was a nightmare to play Koreans because they just have the entire map and you can't see anything.
Yeah.
People think it's bad now. Like I always say that, right? I know there's a lot of young pops and you sound like a boomer, but I've even low key back like privately told some of the great players now who are like, some of them have literally beaten Koreans and stuff. I told them, yeah, you beat Koreans now, but like try playing against them when they had their fucking junglers back in the day. Like it was a different game, mate. Maybe you'd have been great back then. We don't know, but all I'm saying is those guys weren't playing the game you're playing now. You know?
Yeah. I think one of the best changes Riot ever made was getting rid of Tracker's Knife.
Yep. Well, I think that it's also good because it bridged the gap between solo queue and competitive. Because essentially in solo queue it was like never really efficient. Like you could go Tracker's Knife in like super high ELO lobbies where like everyone was really fucking good, and then you didn't really feel like you needed to carry, and you could play more of like a controlled game. But like in solo queue, essentially you'd only go chilling in skirmishers, and then in competitive play, everyone would just go trackers all the time. So it was like all the junglers of transition. It felt like they were like, it was so foreign to them to be using like their smite differently because you just don't have a combat smite anymore. So yeah, I agree with that change being really good. I guess we should jump to the coaching.
Yeah, we should probably do something else.
Well, here's the thing, Tom. Since it is the Crackdown, we're not just going to go quietly into the next section. I'm going to ask the questions that we have to ask.
Go
chat. So here's one of the problems, right? Let's stay on the jungle topic, right?
Okay.
When your first split, you had Broxah as your jungler, right? And this is a player where I don't know. Listen, I know a lot of people who work in the industry. Like, I don't have time to watch other people's shows, for example. There's just not enough time in the day to watch 3-hour podcasts. Sorry, there isn't. Like, if it was text, maybe we could skim it, but we don't have time. So I'm sure you might not have seen this, but basically, you might not know it, but Broxah has actually been a contentious player, I'm not joking, since like 1 year into his career. Because in season 7, when he first started playing for Fnatic, in the summer, Fnatic actually had the best record in LCS, in EU LCS, but famously they lost to Misfits, who had Max Law in the semi-finals, right? And they actually had to go through, like, I think maybe even the gauntlet to get to Worlds that year. And basically, even from that period, loads of what I considered the top analysts, like Veteran, Kelsey, I can't remember if Dom had shows back then or not, but basically everyone who was like super knowledgeable about the game, they were very critical very early on this player, even though, by the way, that's actually technically before his peak. If you're a fan, like season 8 wasn't until a year later and all the world success. So basically a lot of the experts always kind of highlighted like he seems to only have like a lot of strengths when he has the winning lanes, and he doesn't really punish the other jungler as much, and sometimes he just farms and doesn't do anything. And so I will say, again, I'm a layman, so I don't claim to have like super in-depth knowledge like that, but I have noticed he has had a lot of those similar trends throughout all the teams he's been in, and all the sort of, doesn't matter what solo lanes you give him, he seems to have similar things. Now, in your team, he still seemed to have some, like, pretty sweet. He wasn't like a monster jungler. He wasn't going to win the MVP as a jungler, but you made it work. Like in that team, like you were a very good team in the regular season. Obviously, you could have even won the title. So can you give us some thoughts on him? I mean, you were a jungler. Like, it's obviously a nuanced topic. So what was it like working with him? What strengths does he have? What weaknesses do he have? How do you try and use a player like Broxah?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I would say like one thing that's underrated about Broxah is he's someone who deals really, really well with pressure, and he's actually really clutch. And I know those maybe sound like crutch words or something.
Sure.
But his play does not dip in high pressure situations, which I think allows him to win on a lot of teams, even if people see a lot of holes in his game elsewhere. So it makes him a really complicated player to evaluate. But yeah, he's also an extremely coachable player, which puts a lot of onus on the staff with which you're working with in order to try and get good things to happen. Like if you tell Broxah that this is the right jungle path to go, and I think you should invade on this timing, like he's going to do it, and he's just going to pull it off, kind of like a robot. So
that's one of the things.
Positives about
that's
him.
One of the things that we've actually heard criticisms of on the show from former teammates is they said that he was almost like too stagnant in his approach to the game. Like if he was told to go into a game with like a certain mindset or a certain like pathing, he would almost like execute it to a flaw where he wouldn't be that adaptive to things that were that adaptable to like what was going on in the current game. Did you see like elements of that when you were coaching
I'll just
him?
throw in as well, just to complete the thought. Like basically, we had people on his show, some of his teammates. Basically, they described it like this, Jatt. If you told him to go into a brush as the top laner and just wait there, and then you didn't tell him anything, he might just wait there for 1 whole minute and nothing might happen. Now, the point with that is, right, on the one hand, you think, what a great teammate. He does exactly what I want. But Dom's point, and one of Dom's like preaching points he always makes is, he thinks a jungler, because you are a guy who could potentially have 4 players asking for your attention, you have to be able to say no. You have to be able to make like the executive decision, like, look, mate, you might want me to come fix your lane, but I've got to do some other shit. Like in the current, maybe I have to power farm. Like I'm a level behind or something. So his logic was like, sometimes that could go too far and it could become a negative, even if it appears to be like, I'm being a good guy. It's like, well, sometimes you have to tell the top laner, I'm not going to wait in the brush for that P. What would you say to
that? Yeah, I'd say that's something that was probably a bit of a weakness for Broxah, and it's something that we worked on a lot throughout the split. I'm going to say one overarching thing before the show is like, I'm probably not going to be one of those guests that like straight fire rips players, especially former players that coached. And then we went 15-3, lost 2 Game 5s towards playoffs, went 3-3 at Worlds. Like we found a lot of success with Broxah. So I do think he's a good player. Sure. This is a bit of a tangent, but I think it's an important qualifier for the rest of the stuff that I say. Peter Dunn, who I think you've had on the show before, he made a really great tweet a couple months back that said something like, one of the most damaging things towards North America is when people take like an individual event and then extrapolate that to either be consistent or across all teams. So like, there's an interview about someone Q dodging and that counting as a GG. Suddenly people assume that that's like all 10 teams.
That's like all NA culture.
Exactly.
That was the
I mean, another example would be when people were saying that like every single LCS team's just partying like every day before LCS. And like obviously that's like a rare example, or one team does that, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But and it's also like, for whatever reason, it's like never the other way. So you could have like this incredibly responsible player who goes to bed at 11:30, wakes up, works out, has the correct protein and caffeine intake, like does mindfulness exercises. You can talk about that, and then that's not going to get requoted like 30 times in Reddit.
It's not sexy.
By the way, NA players have really great habits. Like, you're not going to say that.
Because people will be like, well, like they didn't fucking win, so it doesn't fucking matter. Like that's normally just the attitude that people have towards it. Is there like,
Dom, do you want to know something really quickly? I've just realised that somehow I didn't remember this until he said all that stuff about, getting up early and drinking water. Because by the way, if you don't know, Broxah's Danish, and he's one of those guys who actually has like a sportsman's like mentality to play the game.
He's got great habits.
Yeah. So basically, this is mad. The reason why that triggered in my mind and memory that I've never told anyone this story is because one day, it was when I was doing Flashpoint 1, which was a CSGO tournament I was involved in. Well, I was in LA at the time, living there for like a month. This is in like the spring. This is before Jatt was the coach. It was when Broxah was just got to the team though, right? And when he just arrived, I'm just living like I can't even remember the name. I think I was around like Culver City. So I'm like fairly like to the west of LA or whatever. And when I was around there, right, I was walking around one day early in the morning though, because I'd had like really bad sleep schedule. Like I was up maybe at like 7 in the morning, and I have to leave at like 8 anyway to go to the studio. And when I was walking around, I can't remember what exact time, I'm just walking around this area, and I literally, no joke, just randomly, Broxah actually was walking down this road. Nobody else is on this road. It's like 7 in the morning, dude. Broxah's walking down. Luckily, he didn't recognize me. He didn't notice me. I was like, maybe I'd like, and the problem with this is, Dom, normally, I would just say like hello or something, but I actually had flamed him so many times on talk shows. I just thought it'd just be better to just leave the guy alone. Like, this is just going to be awkward if I go and say something, So to be fair, I just let that one go. People don't have to get it in real life as well. Come on.
Jesus.
Broxah walks around a lot, actually. He would almost every day, TL's moved since then, but they used to have apartments that were like 40-minute walk from the apartments to the training facility. He would walk every day, like to clear his head.
So those are the old apartments. I mean, I lived in the same apartments when I was a player for TL.
Yeah. They're actually really nice now. The new ones.
The new ones are nice because I hated that area. Like that old area that TL was by, man, like you walk outside of your door and you were just like, because you were really close to the Veterans Hospital, there was a million homeless people right outside the door. I mean, everyone, like, I remember it was so much where like, there was like all these tents that would go, I'm not sure if it's still like that, but there was like, there's a highway right next to the facility. And there was all these tents that would go up like, and there was just one tent all the way at the top of the hill. And we even referred to that guy as like the king homeless person. Like
king
this guy, he's literally the king of the hill.
It's
literally.
like, listen, I'm homeless, but you know what? I'm the fucking king of the homeless. Like, you know, you've always got to have status games, Dom. Exactly,
yeah. No, I respected him. You know, like it was. But I mean, the thing was, all the
it's
homeless
like being rank
really
one on
nice
Challenger.
Yeah, exactly. Killing the ladder. Yeah, he's smurfing it. Like, Jesus Christ. Just like in terms of gameplay, since we were talking about like how TL played last year, there was a lot of criticism towards like early game aggression and like were you guys like able to do enough early? It felt like you guys, generally speaking, were more passive. Was that something that was like consciously on your mind, or did you like disagree with that perception of your team? Like how did you see that as a coach in 2020?
Let me check the stats. So like we definitely had a different approach in summer 2020 than we had in spring 2021. So I think when I came in, especially there was definitely like a lack of committing to like a specific focus for the team. Like they felt like they didn't really know how they wanted to play because like when I asked Broxah, like I asked every player, like, okay, what was the team like when you were most successful? I think this is a great question to ask like any league player. Like, what are you best at? Or what is your defining quality? Like, how did you climb? How did you win? And one of Broxah's, like, one of the things that he felt like he was strongest at was finding creative jungle gank paths. And if you look back to like 2018 with Fnatic, when Scuttle Crab was spawning at like 2 minutes into the game, that early creativity was like extremely important.
Yeah, that was like when I thought he was world class. I mean, his like Elise Lee Sin was actually like top level where he was able to like find these paths for sure.
Yeah, really, really creative. But then like the game has actually changed a lot. So you can have some games where like you go flip a game with a 3-minute gank, but if that doesn't work, like maybe you've actually just flipped the game. Yet like kind of identifying, as we talked about, the efficiency of jungling and how a lot of the best junglers in the world, like I was tracking this, Canyon, Blabber, all of their like jungle proximity and gank numbers, even though people see Blabber as like this really like gank cheese jungler, he was actually farming more than pretty much everyone else in the LCS. And I was like showing this kind of stuff to Broxah and the team, and I was definitely pushing us a little bit to be more efficient rather than doing these like flip plays. And I think I probably pushed us a little bit, maybe a little bit too far into the realm of like, let's actually play safe and go for team fighting, because like my goal at the time was not to reinvent the way the Team Liquid is playing by like, let's be fast and aggressive and get really good at flipping. Because literally this team had just gone 7-11 and lost double lift. So it's like, we don't have much time. We have this 9-week split into playoffs. Let's identify the things that we are best at. And we're actually really great at team fighting, playing through bot prio and having a stable jungler. So we probably like overcorrected back in summer of 2020, but like it actually worked for us. We won more than all the other teams that were experimenting. Where it might not have worked was in the best of fives, where like we were just short. And I think maybe if I would have sacrificed a little bit more regular season success, we could have won some of those series and like finished second or first instead of third. But like the goal at the time of the start of the year was let's get to Worlds. And I looked at the playoff format and I said, if we're top 2, we just have to win 1 best of 5 for Worlds qualification. And actually all of it paid off. We got the number 1 seed, which let us pick our opponent in the second round. We got to play Golden Guardians. So all we had to do was beat Golden Guardians in the best of 5 to make it to Worlds. Like because of the simplistic approach we took to regular season, we were rewarded with a more guaranteed Worlds berth, which was the goal. So like that's, maybe I just revealed a lot, but like that's kind of what I was thinking. So yeah, we did actually kind of intentionally play slow. Because that was what was best for the team. And I made the judgment call that trying to play fast was actually going to be really hard for us.
So you heard it here first. Jatt made Broxah not gank. That's what it was.
Always a combination. It's always a combination between players and coaches. Like I think coaches have, Yeah, it's a negotiation. They have a lot of power, but they also have no power at all.
Yes.
So yeah, it just depends on your relationship, how much influence you end up having.
Yeah. Listen, even if you're literally the coach, that in theory they all listen to you and say yes, sir, and they think, listen, you can. The guy at the end of the day plays the game. Right? He can do whatever he wants. If he's Uzi, he can just lock in whatever it was. And he had a fucking vein mid or something one time. Like the player can ruin all the plans. I've got a spicy topic for you, right, Dom? So I'm wearing a jersey here. People don't know it's a Peyton Manning jersey from when he played for the Broncos, right? And during the pre-game talk, I won't reveal much more, but me and Jatt were just talking about, because obviously, you like talk, or you wearing a jersey or whatever, right? One of the things that is super contentious in the NFL history is Tom Brady and Peyton Manning were basically like the players, because they play quarterback, and they were like the two best. They were all winning the regular season. This was like the rivalry for about 15, 20 years, basically. Right? And it was a fantastic rivalry. And the whole point of it was, in a sane world, which is your preference? Like, which style do you like more, or what do you appreciate more, or is winning more important to you, or is it better to be looking a good individual? Like, there's it actually reveals so much about what you like about sports, what you like about the NFL, what obviously biases to which you just personally like. As a result, right, I've done a lot of work these last few years to rehabilitate the idea that Jensen Bjergsen is the same thing. It is a 1A, 1B scenario when they're both in their prime, but the problem is, what ruined the Peyton Manning Tom Brady story is when Tom Brady just won too many Super Bowls. So it made fans who only care about Super Bowls and reverse engineer the idea if you win the Super Bowl, you were the best. It meant to them it's impossible. Like, you can't win 2, and let's be real, you only won 1 for real. You can't win 1 and the other guy win at the time 6, right? That's just, if you care about rings, it's never going to work. That the disparity's too much. So similarly, because for many years Jensen had never won, he used to get that. People would go, well, obviously Bjergsen's better because he won. And now, I personally have always thought it was a 1A, 1B snap. But I want to know, since Jatt was bold enough in the pre-game scenario to imply that he kind of was in my vein of thinking that, like, it's not just if you win the rings. Like, you've got to look individually, and, someone could be a very good man or good a team. So I want to know, now that he's the coach of Jensen, how would you contrast? You only got to coach against Bjergsen, to be fair, for one split, but you followed him for many years in the LCS.
TSM Jatt versus him coaching Jensen.
So this is why it's OP. It's 5D chess. So the question now is, how would you contrast Jensen against Bjergsen? Because I'm sure a lot of fans will be very interested to know, because you have sort of inside info now.
I mean, they were 1A, 1B for sure. I mean, I think when Jensen came into the league in 2015?
Yep.
Bjergsen was better for sure back then. But then I think Jensen definitely developed to be like definitely at parity, if not better in some instances. Like, so here's a fun story. Jensen definitely has had an elevated level of play whenever we play against Bjergsen. And when we played, I guess we only played TSM twice, like Bjergsen versus Jensen.
Yeah, the best of 5. I mean, I remember I had a really controversial take, but I think in that best of 5, I thought Jensen outperformed Bjergsen.
He did. Dude, in like 3 games or something, he is like the player, and Bjergsen has maybe like 1 carry game from what I remember. He straight up outplayed him then.
That game 4, Bjergsen was running it down. I mean, everyone will remember Jensen getting caught.
Double saved his ass, mate.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Bjergsen was like 0-3, 0-4 in that game. And then, he was running it, and then he just randomly wins the game, and everyone's like, yeah, see, Bjergsen is better, you asshole. Like, they just, like, started flaming him on social media. Like, it's all over the fucking Reddit thread. Like, it was crazy how the response to what happened was so drastically different than, like, what actually occurred in the game.
Yeah, I'm pulling this up. The very first, this is an example of how good Jensen can be. This is my very first game coaching TL. We played TSM to open the split. I had to pull up the pick band for this. So, snapshot of the meta, Syndra is like mind-numbingly OP. Like Varus, like lethality Varus is probably the strongest thing. That's like instant permaban red side for almost everyone. But then Syndra's like next, because not only is Syndra this like busted mid laner, it's also a bot lane flex.
Yep.
Right. Aphelios also very broken.
Syndra's good into Aphelios, so that was the whole meta.
Yeah, and Syndra's good into Aphelios bot lane. So our draft strategy, and also like it's far enough in the past now that like none of this information.
It's not secret info.
Yeah.
It's when Jensen played Azir into Syndra and actually shut on him. I know where this is going.
Okay, Dom's already spoiled it, but I want to tell the whole story.
Tell it.
We thought that like Aphelios is the key for us to win. if we ban all the other OP stuff, they are going to first pick Aphelios. And like, we don't want Doublelift carrying his like first game against TL. Like, let's get rid of Aphelios. Let's give them Syndra. Jensen, can you play against Syndra with Azir? He's like, yeah, I think I can get Prio. But like, at the time, with the current balance of the champions, it is not a winning matchup. Right, like Syndra just wins, and Syndra's been nerfed a lot early game.
And Bjergsen's considered like the best Syndra player of all time.
Signatures,
in the West.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we give over Syndra, they first pick it, and there's like other priority picks at the time. Like like, I'm looking at the pick ban now. Like Graves have been banned, so we actually just 1-2 to Aphelios Trundle. They did Kalista Taric. We played Aphelios Bard against Kalista Taric and Scrims. We're like, this actually, you just Bard out when the Taric ults, so like we win that matchup. So we're going to win bot lane. So we actually let Jensen go 4-5. So not only do we give over Syndra, we let TSM ban 2, and Jensen's comfortable with anything, right, against this other permaban champion. Anyway, he just locks Azir on 4, gets Prio early game. The story of the game is more about like tacticals of Aphelios or CoreJJ's Bard, but like, to me, like the real story of that game was Jensen's Azir neutralizing this matchup, and it let us pull off the strategy. And we beat them in like 24 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was insane. To me, the biggest takeaway there was like fucking Bjergsen lost on Syndra. Like if people don't know, his statistic, like his stats on Syndra are out of this world. It's like 80% win rate lifetime in LCS, maybe even higher. And he has like 50 games on the champion. It's not like 80% win rate with 10 games. It's like 40, 50 games, he has 80% win rate on the champion. So yeah, I remember that being really impressive to me.
Jensen is great, but I also say like his flaws are probably a little bit to do with consistency. Like I think he has higher highs than I think Jensen has higher highs than Bjergsen, but he's not as consistent. So over the course, Bjergsen has gotten more popular. I think also there's been like, I don't know if you remember like 2017 or something, there was a split when LCS was still playing best of threes. Jensen literally had 50 more kills than any other player in the LCS and didn't win the MVP vote.
Yep.
He lost it by 1 point. So literally one person changes their vote and Jensen wins MVP.
I believe as well, because listen, again, I'm one of those people who's pushing one side of this story. I think I even remember this. That was when I got so tilted because everyone knows they fucking always troll vote in those MVP votes chat and those stuff. So that was one where I remember
I think I voted for
I can't remember if but the problem is this.
TSM Jatt strikes again.
The problem is, though, those are the ones where the people who don't want a certain person to win, they'll just like not even put you top 3, and then like. So the problem is, if the people who vote reasonably, even if you think Jensen's better, you're going to put Bjergsen number 2, aren't you? Right? It's the people who they'll put like a silly 2 and 3, and then just put Bjergsen first. So they basically rig the points because unfortunately it works on the NBA, same as the NBA MVP voting, which is like second and third points can be the decider. If it's not just like how many first place points you get. So like, yeah, I agree, mate. That's why to me the idea he never won MVP, like the idea Doublelift won 1 MVP and Jensen won 0, and then Bjergsen has like 1 billion. It's like what? Like in history when we look back and they're like, so Arrow, Rush, like some of these MVPs are going to look really bad in history, mate. Like Jensen was a monster. It isn't going to show in that stat, though, unfortunately.
Yeah, how did Rush win MVP when he wasn't even the best jungler in summer of 2015?
There we go. All right, I triggered someone else there. There we go.
I'm just saying, like that was like the guy that was second in the votes for All Pro second team jungle. Like I don't know, he had a 70% win rate against Rush. That was crazy. I don't know how that happened.
I don't know. That's weird.
I remember, just like since you were talking about the Syndra point, I remember that was after like the first round of Syndra nerfs where they made like the Q go from 40 to 60, and that was when like people started like phasing out Syndra, but it was still considered so OP because of like its flexibility into bot lane. But then I remember TSM, like the game after that, they're like, okay, we can't just pick Syndra and put it mid every single time because there are matchups that aren't great, or at least it was obvious that like they were affected by the fact
this
that
when Doublelift played it.
Yes,
that was one of the worst fucking games I've ever. Like that was because remember,
horrendous.
Obviously, everyone before was like Doublelift. Perks and these other guys can play mid. Why aren't you playing it? And then it's like after you played it, I even did a joke tweet like, actually, I apologize, Doublelift. Never do that again. Like that was bad. That was bad.
Yeah. So their perception was like, you know what? Like Syndra is OP, yes, but we got to be able to flex it. Doublelift, can you play it? He's like, of course, I can play everything. I'm the fucking go to Vene. They run it bot lane. Literally could not even hit a QE. Like forget the EQ like mechanic where you like hide the ball or whatever. No, couldn't even hit a QE. It was bad.
They ran Syndra bot with Fiddlesticks mid and then Lee Sin Volibear is their only physical damage. Like, it might have been the Syndera's problem.
Oh, no. But even regardless of, like, what happened, like, if you just watch the game, like, you watch them get level 3 ganked, and, like, the jungler's coming, doesn't even flash the stun or anything.
Sure.
Double just straight up E's and then Q's, and then they just die because of it. It was just one of those atrocious Syndra games.
By the way,
since
in the context of this whole segment, it's going to look like we're like biased to Jensen or whatever. I will say one thing, right, that which actually should be pointed out about Bjergsen at all times in his career.
You think it's 1A, 1B is what you're saying? Yeah. But one quality that I actually do think is like definitely like he has above almost any other player in LCS history. Maybe Doublelift can match him in this sense. Like, I've seen so many splits where TSM collapses in the middle of the split. This was an example because the games Dom's talking about was when they played that Fiddlesticks 1 game and they won, and then they were like, just keep doing this. Like, they just kept trying to call these whack drafts. Like, when you do drafts like that, listen, it's one thing to do a one-off cheese. When you keep running it, what that suggests is you've got nothing else that works. So you're just trying this weird. Oh no, sorry, it wasn't Fiddlesticks. It was when he was playing like, was it like Ivern or something? What am I thinking?
No, I think it was Fiddlesticks mid. I think it was the tank Fiddlesticks mid. That's what it was.
Yes, you're right. So when he was doing this, right, I remember thinking, this is hilarious. They're done. TSM's done. And I've seen this happen many, many times with TSM, by the way. They collapse mid-split. Now, people know the angle of Reggie comes in and lays down the law or whatever. But I'll tell you this as well. Even if the team does collapse, when the playoffs come, Bjergsen would always steal 1 or 2 games in a series that they had no business winning, and then the amount of times they went on to then win that split or make like at least the semis was unbelievable. Like, put it this way, in history, I've got a million times that I bet against TSM, like winning a semi or a quarterfinal match, where at the time, like, I had all the right reasons, like based on the regular season play, it was legit, it was like a real good, and they always made me wrong on it, and it's all because of Bjergsen in that sense. So I do think you cannot underrate like his ability to sort of like literally just put the team on his back in that context, like the way he played in the playoffs. That is very underrated, I think.
Yeah. Well, I do appreciate the TSM conversation. I don't want to spend too long talking about TSM on the TL podcast.
Sure.
On the Crackdown.
Yeah, no, I mean,
it's just bound to happen, though. Yeah. Obviously, it's the LCS. Obviously, all roads lead to TSM. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the funniest thing that people normally attack is they're like, wow, how come like every single LCS podcast you guys talk about TSM? It's like, I don't know, maybe because they're the most fucking popular team in the history of the region.
Maybe they won like 9 titles and have the largest social media followings of all teams.
Also, you want to know another reason why we do it? From people making comments like that. Engagement. Thank you. Yep. We win. Yeah. If you don't want us to do it, don't say anything.
You said something like 9 years ago, which is definitely true, and people don't understand it. Everyone knows haters make you famous, but famous haters make you more famous. Yes. So like if people want to criticize Thorin, the only way you can do it is to ignore. Otherwise, you're just constantly signal boosting, right? Yes. Like no matter what, when you were 40K, if you can pick a fight with someone who has 500K Twitter followers, like you're not actually losing that in the long run, maybe in the short run. But like your clout's just going to get higher and higher. So, I mean, you're committed to the crowd.
That is a real quote, actually. That's a tweet I did do years and years ago, Dom, because the context was Reggie was obviously the one that originally said haters make me famous. So since at the time Reggie was my hater, and like I was blacklisted from everything, I was like, well, famous haters make me more like I just took the line of fucking Valorant. So thanks for the alley, Reggie.
If you want to go far back, that when my team qualified to WCG, which was like a lot of the players that became Dignitas, our team name was Haters Make Us Famous in 2010. That was like our team that qualified to WCG. Okay. So I think that's like where it started with League of Legends. It was with a Classic, who Jatt probably knows from Riot.
Oh, yeah, Classic. He's legit. He's like a designer on. He designed a bunch of Valorant. Yeah, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So that, I mean, he was just like one of the best players at the time, and he was somebody that I got the pleasure of playing with before he was.
I've got a good topic for us now, because here's the thing. It's in the same way as what I tried to do on the design topic, you'll notice, Jatt, is I tried to take like the fact that like if we hadn't have talked about it, it would be kind of bullshit, because like the idea like Dom's going to complain about like balance fucking every podcast, and then when he actually has someone on, not bringing like that would be nonsense. So similarly, right? Yep. I actually saw a clip very recently. If anyone watches the other show, again, I don't have the time, but I see the clips. Like I actually love the fucking clips channels people have where they put up the good ones. If anyone watches Face Check, because LS is on the show and Dom is on the show, an absolute preoccupation of these guys, justifiably so though, which I want to ask Jatt, is like LCS players don't understand basic macro concepts, like they don't understand lane assignments. Sometimes they don't even like they don't even know how to use the Baron to manipulate the waves to fucking like to push it in here. Right now, I noticed your team wasn't excluded from this, Dom. Like yours is what basically they counted for pretty much even the top teams in NA.
Yep.
So this is essentially a question that's a bit about the team. It's also like about like what coaching's like. Because here's the thing, I refuse to believe that when you do the review session or you coach them, you are talking about these concepts and you're trying to drill. So explain to us, like, how do these things like seem like they're nailed down, or you seem like, and how do they go wrong in the game? Because I will say it's not just like haterism on NA. Like LCS does have some of the sort of more egregious ones, like when they just go for the Herald when it makes no sense
like
and stuff.
That was one of the ones we talk about all the time, like the overcommitting for Herald. Like there was the famous one you guys had versus EG, where like you guys were down your Camille Galio ult, and the enemy team had like Nara turning Mega and Yone like had his ult, and you guys just got like you were up like 2-3K. Oh man, it's starting to like trigger. I can see like the PTSD triggering. And okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Like those types of situations, like how do they occur, and like why do you think that it's so common in NA compared to like other regions?
Yeah, so I do think it's more common in NA. This is a really good topic, and hopefully I don't come across as too defensive.
Sure.
Because I do care a lot about.
No, I wanted to kind of hear the other side. That's the kind of I'm setting up, you know. Yeah.
So, I think there is a step that is skipped in the framing of this type of discussion, Dom, in like maybe even like the Saving NA series or in the discussion, because probably our worst Rift Herald of the year might have even been the EG one.
Yep.
Right? We had like this massive gold lead on Alfari. We just pulled off like a couple more kills.
Yeah, and then Galio just dove top, like the Nara was out of the game.
I don't have the game exactly, but we'd given up like 1 or 2 dragons, and we just like given up a bunch of objectives. So like in the moment, someone on the team was like, we're super far ahead. Like, let's just stop giving away objectives for free. Like, let's fight. And if you win that fight, like there was actually probably moments in that fight where it was winnable, but from a pure macro perspective, it was a stupid play. So why do those things happen? Like in that instance, it was in-game frustration of giving away other neutral objectives and an overconfidence of our strength, even though we knew our ultimates were down. So any time you walk into a fight, you should theoretically be doing a condition check on your own ultimates, on opponent ultimates, on flashes.
Yes.
You should realize where your teammates are in relation to the opponent team, because you should be doing an objective based off of some advantage, whether it's an item power spike, whether it's you push like bot or mid lane and you're there first, whether it's through vision control and you're going to fight on a zone when they enter. Like there's a lot that goes into it. So essentially, like my problem with the framing of some of these discussions of like not understanding why it happens is I think it's unfair to take the most egregious example and then use that as a basis for understanding. Because there's also several Rift Herald or Dragon moves that were very good by Team Liquid throughout the year. And showing one mistake and then trying to paint that as a lack of understanding is where my problem actually comes in. So why does it happen more in NA? We're not as good as other regions. Like that's what happens. But
well, I think what I try to do is like not like take multiple different teams doing the same thing, because it's hard to find like a common like theme, right? Like so what I'm trying to do in this series is like compile like footage from like 3 or 4 teams to show like the lack of understanding. And I tried to like use ones that were super recent. So like let's say like TL did it in week 3, but they improved on week 4 and 5. I have the TL from week 3, and then like in I think the most recent one, I took one from like the day before or that same day, where I was like, okay, this is like one from TSM to show that it's like a common problem throughout. But yeah, I definitely agree that there are times where it's executed properly. But for me, I guess my perception is like it should not even it should be so like second nature to understand like, hey, like, are they overcommitting for this Rift Herald? Can we send our AD carry bot? Like that it should like almost never happen towards. Like,
I guarantee you could find
it happens
or LCK or LEC games where teams are making stupid Rift Herald decisions.
Oh, 100%. And I've included those as well.
Yeah. Okay. But
those are on VOD reviews. Videos,
yeah. But then the framing of those videos isn't they don't understand it. So it's like, and I can make this relation to like other sports. Like if someone defends a pick and roll improperly, and a guy gets a free dunk, right? You can probably find like 25 examples of the player missing the pick and roll, but that's not because they don't understand how to defend it. It's like it's either an execution or like an in the moment decision problem. right? That's just a
Yeah. What about this then?
Definitely.
Obviously, that's a very. We sort of threw you there because the tangent went on the specific thing about Rift Herald. Let's make it more like the general macro concept. I'll give you an example, right? Because it's a game that you will have watched because it was your team, Team Liquid, in the playoffs against TSM. You know the fight where Hooney, well, basically TSM, I think even has the fucking Baron or something, and they're pushing in the top lane with 3 players, and Hooney like inexplicably goes into like the fucking I think it's the Raptors part and like the blue side jungle or whatever, himself. And he just gets himself wrecked by your team. They just collapse on you, get a free kill, and basically you just turn the game from there. Like they're in a winner position, Dom, where if they Jatt, where if they just literally push in the top or just manipulate the waves correctly. Like you basically can't do anything. You have to just defend, and you just turn the whole game.
It's like an 8K gold lead.
Which game is this?
This
the first time you played them, I think. Was it the first series they played?
I just remember it was. I think it was the game where you guys were down like 8K and there was this like massive throw around top.
No, I missed it. Are you talking about the Nocturne Annie game?
Yes.
No, what was Hooney playing in this one though? What was Hooney playing? I'm trying to remember what his champion was.
I think it's the Nocturne Annie one.
Yeah, it must be. Like, if it's a playoff series against TSM and we're 8K down and we won the game, it has to be. It has to be confined. Yeah. Sorry, what was the question again?
Well, I mean, the example is, in that case, like, all you have to know is how to use the Baron to actually take down towers and inhibs. And instead, TSM, like, why is Hooney just in a fucking going towards a brush where someone face-checking a brush, essentially, in the jungle? Like, he's not doing anything there. Like, and if you want to talk about opportunity cost, if I pause the game and go, Hooney, what's the opportunity cost here? What do you win if you get this? Nothing. You just...
Yeah.
What?
If you pause the game, like if you're TSM and you're doing that VOD review and you pause the game and be like, what the fuck are we doing? He'll be like, oh yeah, I'm being an idiot.
Right. It's just simple as that.
He understands, most likely. And like there's a ton of different ways you can try to deploy after Baron that depends on your team comp, and you're trying to understand it in the moment. Like, do you play 3 lanes? Do you do 1-3-1? Do you just 5 stack on one wave?
Yes.
A lot of times you're going to try and like retake a zone of control with as many players as possible, and then have like one person catching the wave, so 2 waves are crashing at the same time. Like, most teams play on 2 lanes, and if like you're against Nocturne Annie, you're going to want to play on 2 lanes, but like you actually have to be really scared against a Nocturne, so it's going to be like a little harder to retake. And yeah, TSM was probably just on autopilot. So they definitely fucked it up. I don't think that's because they don't understand how it works, though, is I guess the difference.
Yeah. So I guess I guess your take is that the reason why it happens is just simply not being as good. It doesn't have anything to really do with like not understanding the things like conceptually. It's more just about like.
Let me push back on that, Dom, because the problem is, listen, Jatt's doing a very good job on defense right now, but you know what? Better offense beats better defense any day of the week.
Can I actually grab a snack? We've been
on.
Go for it.
How about wait a minute? Let me just finish this last topic.
Okay.
Can we do this last one? Then we'll do, because this will kind of wrap this up. All right. Listen, you made some good defense on a lot of those points, but here's the one problem I have, Dom. Fucking Jatt. One of my biggest problems in LCS forever, and I'll keep saying this until they start doing it, is except for specific players, they're nearly always European, who just know how to do this very, very well. Dude, the amount of side laning during the metas that existed that happens in LCS, like I could probably count on one hand, and then I would always switch over and I would watch LEC, and even people like Nuktuk would do it every game, mate. Jizuki, they would do all, like the European solos always knew. Wonder, they would just do it every time, because if their champion was ahead, they knew how to basically push pull and fuck you on the map or just win the game off it. And in NA, famously, they would almost never do this. They would just group and team fight, even if they had the weaker team fight comp. And every time we had coaches, like a lot of them would actually be very cynical. They would just say stuff like, look, like my job is to win this split or to win these games. Like, I haven't got time to work on like a long-term project. So if I don't think the player can like fully execute it, I'm just going to tell them to just team fight. I'm just going to tell them, like, just find a decent fight, like, work together. Like, do you have some thoughts on that? Because you've come outside as a caster, you will have seen some of this. Like, that's the one that always feels a bit egregious to me, because it feels like the only region, I know now the meta doesn't really suit that anyway, it's dragon fights, but when it was possible, I felt like LCS was the only region that never really tried to play into
I would even say right now, like, you see more side laning, it's just obviously it's utilized differently than it used to be. Like, instead of like side laning to like split down the objective or like kill the guy under turret or like take turrets by yourself, more often, like when I watch LPL, it's always about like getting pressure in the side lane and then moving first and then winning the TP and then doing it again, and then you actually like get an advantageous fight. Like, yeah, so I would say that there's still like issues with side laning in NA. Do you think that that's something that yeah, I mean, like to Thorin's point, like is this just an issue? Like, what's your take on why this
how do you
occurs?
explain it? Yeah. There's nothing, and because here's the other thing, Jatt. It can't just be the players for that, because like people like Jensen, Bjergsen, like some of these guys definitely, if you like ask them to, I'm pretty sure they have the skills to do it, the game understanding, right?
Yeah, exactly. I also want to pull up like who are all the top laners in LCS or like the mid laners in LCS, because typically it's top and mid who play side most of the time. Of course. And like those are probably majority import like roles.
Yeah, they basically are.
Like, like someday Alfari, Jensen, Bjergsen.
Well, that's what's weird is you take these players like, I mean, Alfari was pretty good at side laning the split, but you take a lot of the players and it's like they know how to side lane when they're in EU, and then they come to NA and then suddenly that's lost. And like there's been a bunch of different takes. You know, we've heard people say that part of the reason is because people are like less confident as like the 3. They just keep on calling for people to come mid. They're like, oh, we can't walk up, or they're not sure of their limitations. Like the group isn't aware of their limitations. So then they end up like dragging everyone in.
Another obvious one that the really good players like Dom's talking about who've done it in their career say is like, look, I can't trust that when I'm the 1 and they're the 3 or 4 that they won't fight. That's the other classic one, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, if the team loses confidence and it ends up becoming a team fighting game, you're gonna fuck it up. I think there is probably, and again, like maybe this will be the thing you guys are able to like clickbait out and make the title of the episode. Probably not, but like I know I've probably already said something that's gonna make like a banger headline. Sure. So I'm fucked in that sense.
Mm-hmm. I ruined Broxah. Boom, doom. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Damn. So, okay. I mean, I'll use an example from TL from last split to this split from like 2020 to 2021. Mm-hmm. The types of champions that we were playing are different, and our coaching staff has been a little bit different as well, because we had Kane as strategic coach in summer 2020, and we had Cole the strategic coach for 2021 spring, and we had very different top laners stylistically. Like you look at the champions that Impact played, and he's a fantastic tank initiation player. But also you look at Jensen's champion pool and it's pretty control mage focused. So when you looked at a TL team comp most of the time, which was pretty narrow in summer 2020.
Control mage mid, tank top, Graves jungle.
Neither of those champs are particularly strong on side. So generally speaking, we could not get side prio. Right. So most of the time, actually, we were trying to draw the other team to us. So either we set up Ornn in a side lane, we shadow with our jungler, and we try and go like mid to bot to punish the other top laner, and then we set up the objective. This split, we played a lot more side lane because of the champions we were playing. So when Alfari was on Gnar or GP or Renekton, he would almost always win side. So we could always get side prio. We could always crash a wave. We wait for the other team to respond to it. Then we group as 5 and take the objective. So like, if there's a lack of side laning in a region or on a team, I think first you should look at the champions, because each team is going to have a different goal. Like one team will win side, one team will not win side. The team that doesn't win side is the team that's going to be grouping more. In 2020, we were almost always the team that wanted to be grouping more. And usually the best team in a region sets the meta. Like this happens in Europe with G2 all the time. Like if they're shitting on people with side lane comps, people are like, God damn it. Like we've tried to play 5v5, but we can't win side, and they constantly just push and move, and they're always fighting with numbers advantage. Whereas in NA, if you have TL and we're always winning with numbers advantage by just camping mid and punishing you when you're on side, like that can over time become the dominant meta of a region. I don't think that was the case as much this split, because we had us and C9 playing side a lot. But even C9, I think when they were at their best, they had Fudge on a tank and were not necessarily playing through side as much as maybe some other teams like Damwon last year were doing, where they usually had like a really good split threat on either the mid or the top lane champ. So yeah, like tons of moving parts with that. But if I'm trying to make an overgeneralization, like the team comp and champion styles that are really popular in NA generally favor team fighting. Because that's what works, and you really don't have that much time to change in between splits. And was actually one of the things that we attacked in spring of this year by trying to play more side lane champs. Like Jensen played, I think, like 14 different mid lane champs. A lot of them can be good on side. Alfari was almost always playing a winning side laner. So we developed a lot on how to play as many side waves as possible to try and like use that to our strength. But yeah, if you're going over the long course of the region, the dominant teams in NA have generally been like with traditional team comps. Whereas more recently, like you look at the way Wonder plays, like he's just playing different champions. And I think that's one of the big reasons they play side more.
Okay, sounds good.
Right, if you want to get your snack, fair enough. Go on.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Go for it. Yeah.
What now? Do we do the let's all go to the lobby? Let's go.
Yeah, we have a sing along.
I know.
Oh man, I don't think we've ever had a guest leave for a snack in the middle of the podcast before. That's interesting. We have to figure out how to fill time, I guess. No, I think I agree with a lot of the points he's saying. I just think that like when I see what happens, I feel like the reason why people play like that is because they're scared to play the champions like will win on side. Like most people are like, you know, like I could pick Jace here. Just give me Sion though. Like
there's a reason the NA Jace is a meme, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. NA Jace.
Or NA Rekdom back in the day.
I mean, you watch like LPL and Jace is like insane prio. People,
of course.
I mean, the first 3 games of the finals was like one team picks Jace, the other team picks Aurelia. It's like Jace counter to Jace. Like that's how people view it. And
the thing is, though,
willing to play those champions.
To be fair, I actually like the part where he just like revealed his bias that like, look, I'm probably not going to like hard flame people because he is a coach. The thing is, if we had him more when he was a caster, maybe he would have gone a bit harder on that. As a coach, like. He is playing defense. Like he's looking for like basically where like it's like it's not always like that. And
well it's probably hard
to do this.
I mean,
no doubt it is. Of course, yeah.
That's one of the things I want to ask.
You can't say like, well, the players are pussy. Like obviously, not going to say,
yeah.
What I miss?
Nothing. I mean, what we were thinking about asking you next, or what I was thinking about asking you next was just about like for you as a coach, what did you like? What was the hardest thing to take on, or what was the thing that was the most different? Like perception wise from like when you were outside, when you were casting to when you joined a team, because like for example, like I can say like all this stuff about like a bunch of stuff that I was preaching, right? Like side lane, choke control, rift heralds, like that was like 3 things that I was always talking about in LCS games, where like, you know, I'm sure that all these teams talk about these concepts. So like what was the thing that for you was like the hardest to like implement, that you were like, oh, this is like really obvious from the outside, but you know, like once you're inside the team, it's a lot harder. It's a lot more complicated of a problem than I you know, perceived before. So like, was there anything like that fits into that category that I just pretty much explained?
Yeah. Although I want to flip this on you for a second, so I have time to eat the bar, but I think this can be, I'm actually really curious what your take is on this. So like, you've also done the other switch.
Yes. Which
was player to commentator / you know, flamer. But, and, you know, occasionally hype man.
Okay.
But, like, we all know how reviews work. Like, coaches can drive, but depending on the team, it can be an incredibly player-focused decision.
Yeah.
Did you understand these concepts as a player? That you're now criticizing teams for not having?
Ooh.
So
I've got a great follow-up for this as well, Dom, so I want to hear your answer. Come on.
Well, I'll say a couple things. I think that actually, like, it's a different time, right? Because now you're operating with a lot less vision than you were before.
Okay, this is
so
good,
like
yeah.
I think that's like one of the biggest things you have to like factor in is before everyone had wards, everyone could buy pinks. So there was a lot more like, and you could place like multiple pinks at the same time, right? Like you could place like 2 or 3 pinks and just pink, 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 and like you could do that yourself. So I think that because there was a lot more vision, you had like way more resources. So like a lot of these things were not as similar as now, where like you're dealing with limited vision. And I think that that's actually a big benefit, because now you actually can expend that resource. Before, like, it wasn't like you could expend somebody's pink wards. It's like, they got another one. This guy has 2, that guy has 2. Like, everyone had wards themselves. There's 15 fucking wards. So it was a lot harder to be like, okay, we can play to like kill their wards and then burst something. I would say that the thing is, when you're a player, you're so much more, or at least I was like this, where you're so much more focused on your own individual performance, making sure you know all the champions. You can play every champion in the meta. You're playing well in the game. Like you're so like focused on yourself that you don't have like the perspective of like, oh, this is like what the whole team should be doing. You can like try to have that, but I think it's a lot harder for most players to like detach. Like for example, like I think that my game knowledge is a lot better now that I've watched so much of the game than when I was playing a lot. And also I think it's just been years, right? Like it's been like 5 years since I played professionally. So I think that like the whole time I've been watching pro play and I've been talking to players and I've been learning from like other people. So I think that's also what it is. It seems like pro play is more like about refining your mechanics and like being really good at the game, rather than like having like all this like external knowledge. So like I guess like that's kind of like where I'm at, where I don't think I understood everything, but I think that I had more like of an understanding of the game on like a wide approach than the average player, which is why like I was like the captain of my team or whatever. Like
you set me up perfectly, dude. You set me up perfectly. If Jack can finish the cookie here, because here's the question now, Dom. I actually wanted to ask this question on Zips. I thought it in advance. Here was the question, right? Cause, like, listen, I'll always say you are a lot more like reasonable in how you couch your statements than LS, because LS actually, part of his charm is that he's a firebrand personality. It's the same as my shit. You think I really think everyone's shit? No, some of them are just not very good at the game, you know. But if you put all that context in, like, no one would watch. So
yeah, but it's like Broxah is like
Dom.
an extremely great player. He's like the top 0.001%. But when you compare him to like the top 0.000,
yeah. There you go.
7%, like, damn, that's like, then he's like a little bit worse, you know, like it just ruins the whole statement. It's like, so everyone's great. Like, of course.
It's like I once explained to someone, you have to realize, like, pro players effectively at the top 0.1%, but because that is all it is, that's 100% of it. Therefore, if you're at the bottom, you're trash compared to the guy at the top, even though actually the relative distance is non-existent compared to everyone in the world. Anyway, this is the question, because you led into it right there, Dom. If you now were a pro player for next split, right, and we're ignoring stuff like maybe you don't feel like your mechanics are up to scratch, or maybe you haven't played the game enough, ignore that. Let's say you're in like peak condition, and you could go back now and play. And you know what? Fuck it. You're the jungler of a top team. You could be on Cloud9. You could be on Team Liquid, whatever, right? You've got good players around you. Knowing what you know when you do these VOD reviews, like, listen, people can misexecute. Other players can do things. All that's great, right? But would you genuinely very rarely ever make these like macro mistakes in your opinion? Would you nearly always like have a sense of where you were supposed to do? Like, would you be able to take that knowledge into the game with you is my question.
It's really hard, right? Because like you can be too late on the call. Like, let's say I'm playing the game, right? And I'm at Rift Herald and I put down a pink ward and I see that they're moving for Rift Herald and I'm like, okay, like they're moving the AD carry. But by the time that like I might not notice that my AD carry is moving because like, let's say I'm at the Rift Herald, right? Like I'm putting down pink wards. I'm playing against like a Thresh or something. They're throwing like skill shots at me. There's like risk of me dying. If I'm in that situation and then like I might not have the awareness of being like, oh, my AD carry is like making a mistake right now. My AD carry is moving when he shouldn't. Like, I think that that's what's really hard to do is like be micromanaging yourself, but then be also like correcting mistakes from other people. I think that like out of game I could add a lot, which is like the reason why I've legitimately been considering like potentially coaching in the future.
Strategic coach would obviously make sense in line if you're into that shit.
Well, I mean, I just think that I feel like a lot of people don't actually like a lot of the coaches that we've had before don't actually like watching VODs or don't watch the other regions. Like there's a lot of people that kind of transition from being a player to a coach that didn't really have like their heart in it. It was kind of just like, this is a transition where I can like still make money
job or whatever. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's like another. So like I feel like, you know, at least I think that I would be able to like try it as hard as humanly possible, because if I was making that, it would come at the like with a huge sacrifice. It's like, okay, I'm like sacrificing streaming and everything. So I don't know if I'd be able to do it in game, but I think that I'd be able to contribute to like the teams and VOD reviews, because I think I have like the other side of it. I feel like players generally like being coached by former pro players more than people that like haven't, you know, had that experience. Like I'm sure that Cold is really effective in that world, and like especially since he's like played with Alfari before, I think that they would probably have like, you know, like a lot of mutual respect. So I think that would be something that's good. Also, I feel like if you can still perform on the ladder, if you're still like getting in games with pro players and you're not like a complete like washed up piece of shit, like I feel like that gives you some like street cred or whatever you want to fucking call it. Where
yeah, with the players, yeah, for sure.
So I don't think that like I would ever go back and try to like play, or I don't know if I would be able to like do everything in game, like because I think that right now, if I were to go back, I would have to have such like a focus on my mechanics to make sure that I wasn't like making mistakes in the game myself, that I might not be able to like manage other people, right? But I think that like in a team environment, I'd be able to like contribute to like VOD reviews and like a team success. But who knows?
What do you think on this whole topic, Jatt? What's your take while you were listening and all that? Because I've got a good follow-up for you, but go on.
I mean, that's a lot. Maybe I'm going to end up changing the topic.
No, just pick whatever you like about it.
Yeah. I mean, so one interesting thing that happened when I switched to coaching full time is like, this is by far the hardest job I've done. From, I mean, being like a pro player before, like fake pro player almost, before pro play was like LCS, where we can't practice that much. Like I still solo queued a bunch, casting to now. Cause like the schedule really is nonstop. And weirdly, as a caster, you get to watch a lot more International League than you do as a coach. Because there's just so much other stuff that you're working on, like daily scrims,
reviewing your own VODs,
trying to find patterns in your own play, trying to go really deep on like a specific champion that you're trying to add, maybe going really deep on like a setup that Dom1 is doing to try and figure out if there's any patterns. Like, so really my breadth of league like viewership is way lower than it would have been like a year ago, which is actually not something I necessarily expected coming in. I thought like, oh yeah, like I'm not going to be casting and I'm not going to be doing story meetings and making content. So, you know, I have time to do all this stuff. Like I barely even have time to play. Also I have like wrist issues, so it's hard for me to play. But yeah, that was like one of the most surprising parts. I think as a caster, it was always like, oh wow, yeah, like why aren't they paying more attention to like the meta developments in China or Korea? It's like sometimes it's because they literally have no time, and also we're a patch ahead. So by the time it happens in China, and we know that it's there, and you factor in practice time, it's like literally already nerfed. So like there's that aspect of it as well.
Yep. Basically, all I want to say on this topic is like, and this is absolutely not to denegate Don because he was a pro. He knows some of what I'm about to say. One of the things that is impossible if you've never played, it doesn't even have to be to play. Like, I'll give you an example. Even what we're doing right now, there will be people in Twitch chat criticizing what we're doing right now who think, well, I'm putting just good points in Twitch chat. Well, listen, you don't know what it's like to have a camera on you. You don't know what it's like to know people are watching you. You don't know what it's like to know that, like, this guy might say a point in a minute and I might have to finish. You know, there's so many moving parts.
Keep it interesting. Think about the next topic. Like,
if we do that well, it's invisible. So one of the problems is when you watch as just a detached observer, and you're able. By the way, half the time, people in the modern day were like YouTube. You can even pause the fucking live game because you can catch back up and go, oh, replay that. And by the way, anytime.
I do it all the time in VOD reviews.
Yes. Anytime Dom's going to go really deep on a point, he's going to keep rewinding it and go, look at this setup here. But that'll happen in real time. My principle I explain is like this. Think of an iceberg where the part that you see is actually, it might look huge, but there's more underwater than that. Think of the mind like that, right? Make the conscious mind the top of the iceberg, and all the part underwater is like the subconscious. It's the part that you don't directly control, but it's basically the majority of your brain, your mind, right? Whatever's going on there. When you play in a match and you feel any pressure at all, in my opinion, the experience is like you get locked in the top part. And so all that amazing shit, you might have all the knowledge in the world, you might have all that, you can't access it. You're trapped up here where you're just reacting like an animal, like you just things are happening and you, oh fuck. Because I have to say, one of the things people don't know, one of the reasons I do my style on these shows, it's because I make it lighthearted, I make it fun the whole time. Like I don't make it like serious. So as a result, I can still grab things and fun, I can move and be... As a player, that's why, in my opinion, the truly great players, it's one of the things I actually makes Caps very unique. Caps looks like, even when he does a ridiculous int that you should feel very bad about in the game, he just fucking laughs it off like, ah, and then as a result, his team even doesn't get, they go, yeah, he'll come back in the game. Like, I mean, the great players have a different mentality, you know.
Does he int because he doesn't have an understanding of it being a good or bad
play? Good example.
Yeah. Or wait, does he just int because like mistakes literally happen to the best players?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
it's just like
pressure and all that stuff has massive implications, and experience have like way more than you realize in converting what you actually see on screen. Yeah. You can do it in solo queue, you can do it in scrims, and then there's still a whole nother level before you can do it in like a competitive.
Dude, I believe all those stories where they say about the scrim gods, like this guy's incredible in scrim. But that's why I always tell the coach, like, don't keep telling me that. But I have to see it eventually, like LCS. It can't just be forever that, you know, he's fucking secretly amazing. Like they have to do it on stage eventually.
Yeah, of course. I mean, no one will say that Phoenix is like would ever have been like a top mid laner in NA. But like if I were to tell you from scrims and TL, like he literally would shit on Bjergsen like up and down, like different matches.
Phoenix,
like,
dude,
he was
how could you never get talented by control words? Literally every year that dude bought like one control word a game.
I mean, like that's the thing is it's such a harder problem. Like from the outside, you'd be like, yeah, just tell the motherfucker to buy control words. Like I'm his jungler, I can tell him to buy control words, right? But like.
It seems so fucking simple.
Yeah, no, but it's like, oh, well, he'll be like, oh, I need the pots for this matchup, and I need like Doran's Ring, Dark Seal, boots to pressure, and then these are the two components for my item, so I don't have a slot for pick. And then you can be like, well, you don't really need like the Doran's Ring, but then he's like, no, in the matchup, I need it to be able to kill on this timing. And then like in a game, I'm not going to be like, okay, like go back to base, sell your fucking items, buy a controller, like and walk onto the map. Like that's not going to happen, right? So it's really hard to do those things. And like we had whole meetings.
Yeah. Exactly. You have meetings about it. How do you approach the problem? Because I definitely have an agenda here, because I think there is like a culture of negativity and oversimplification of how these problems should be solved. But like this is an example from your playing career when you had a coaching staff and you were a teammate and you had this mid laner who like never warded properly for ganks, right?
Never.
And it's something could never get over. Like,
and we had the meetings where we even had Mark Z break down all the stats of how many control wards he would buy on average in LCS. In 18 games, he averaged buying 0.5 control wards a game. Meaning,
not even one a game.
Meaning he bought 9 control wards for a whole split. I don't know how the fuck I was able to jungle with my mid laner never buying a control ward the entire fucking split. That's impossible. Like, it's so hard to
the Shy did the same thing, by the way, in the past. Like, the Shy never bought control wards either. In like 2019 or something.
Yeah, but I mean, like, they're really hard because, like, the other thing is, like, players are stubborn and have egos and things like that. But I also think that was like a failure of the people that were put in place because, like, I mean, to be honest, like, TL just needed a Korean coach. There was no.
You just bench him if he doesn't put control words down. Like, what do you do?
So yeah, I mean, you can't bench him. Like, I think now you have way like of a higher chance to like be able to like do those types of things because like I mean, you saw it, right? Like, when you put Grig into the jungle, it's not like he's gonna solo lose the game. Whereas like in my day, there were not like good backup players. Like, if I play, like, Keith was an exception where Keith was actually able to like perform on stage when we needed him, but like no one else would be able to do that. If we took our academy mid laner and put him in LCS, we're guaranteed losing. Like, he will solo lose us the game because he would not be able to lane against like Jensen, Bjergsen, like all those types of guys in LCS. So I mean, I think that now you have like more of a like you have more you have more tools to work with because essentially there's like you have like deeper coaching staffs and now like academy, even if it's not taken like fully serious by some teams, like most teams like are trying to like have like a culture.
We utilized our academy team a lot this year. On TL. We flamed out on Proving Grounds, but other than that, we had like a really successful year. I think we had like 60 or 70 scrims against them, honestly, like total number of games.
I have a question for you, just as like a side. We can jump back into everything later. But have you guys entertained, like, I know, like, I've talked to Nelson a lot. He's been on the show. A couple of things that he's mentioned is like they try different styles of scrims. Like, they'll do like no communication scrims, like where you're not allowed to vocally communicate. Like, have you like thought about like doing this or implementing it? Do you think that there's like value being lost by teams not having like for example, no ward scrims was one. Another one was like no communication, where you just play the game like as if it was solo queue, but with your teammates against your like academy team. Like, you do like 10-minute like scrims where you end the game at like first herald. Like, are these like tools that you think are like attractive or like that you've like already tried? Or, I mean, without revealing too much, just give us your take on this style of practice.
Yeah, we've tried them actually. I watched that episode, and it's strange because like there's very little incentive for NA teams or like NA personalities to put themselves in front of like the horde to try and stop flaming or anything. But I called them blitz scrims, and I started doing them in 2020 as soon as I started with TL. Like, every day before scrims, we'd do a 50-minute warm up with our academy team where we could preset team compositions for any champion or matchup we wanted to play on the day to warm up. And we just do that. It's fast, right? Because you don't have to go through champ select. You can straight do blind pick, and it's a good warm up. We've done no comm scrims as well on a day that has been particularly stressful if you just want to practice mechanics and lower the burden of communication. I think they're like mildly effective, but I think overall they're probably like a little bit more of, I don't know, like a headline or something that is something that's supposed to be useful. It's almost like I read a book. I think it was called like 11 or something. It was the Phil Jackson book.
11 Rings or whatever. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. But he talked about like with the Chicago Bulls, sometimes in practice to like piss off Michael Jordan, they'd do scrimmages against the second team, and he'd literally tell the refs to just let them hack the shit out of him, like make him as frustrated as possible. And then technically, like down the road, that makes him more capable of handling, resilient to adversity throughout score. Like, you like turn the lights down so you can't see the hoop well enough. Little stuff like that. But like trying to port those things to League is actually really difficult because it's so hard to simulate a stage pressure practice environment. Or it's so difficult to actually practice specific scenarios. Like that's all any of these scrims are trying to do, right? Like that, a no-comm scrim is practicing a specific scenario of it's really fucking chaotic and you need to be able to do the right thing, or no one makes the right call and you need to still be able to go in space. But I think overall they're actually not that useful.
Do you think part of it, because like we've tried, and in my experience, it was the players not taking them serious enough that really like hampered the ability to really learn from those scrims? Do you think that that's part of it, like still, or maybe that was just my experience, but like, do you think that there's an element
taking like
a no comms scrim, like people like are kind of like trolling because it's like, oh shit, we're not using comms anyway, it doesn't really matter. I mean, we're gonna have comms in the real game, so who the fuck cares about a no comms scrim? I mean,
definitely, like, you need to have buy-in from everyone to be able to do it. Otherwise, it is going to be it's going to fall flat on its face. But we did on an occasion, so I can see that being a problem for sure.
Okay, interesting.
One specific player I want to ask about on your team is actually, obviously there's the big names, Alfari, Jatt, but I want to actually ask about CoreJJ. So working with this guy, right? When we talked before about all those MVPs, mate, the MVPs he's won in his career are legit as fuck. Like, it says a lot if from support position, everyone just goes, yeah, you're the best player in the entire league. Like, but everyone looks at him since he came to Team Liquid and the impact he has had on that squad. Like, there's a reason why they've been in like a bazillion finals since then. So give us some thoughts on working with him. Because again, if you're watching the LCS and you see a guy, again, you can think he's brilliant, but you might not know how he's brilliant or what is he doing or you credit the wrong person. So again, give us some thoughts. What is he doing and what are his strengths?
Yeah, I mean, dude's a machine. So here's maybe a funny story for people that have actually watched this like 2-hour-long episode. I left casting at the start of 2019. So like my biggest gap in like esports was 2019 spring until like a little bit after MSI, which was the year that CoreJJ joined Team Liquid, won MVP, and went to MSI finals.
Yep.
And actually kind of when the LEC started overtaking the LCS. Probably like due to just the fact that they won MSI. Like that was honestly, I think, the biggest moment. But like narratively, as someone who didn't pay that much attention, I'm like, how the hell does a support join an MVP in the bot lane and then win MVP? Like, isn't it just Doublelift who should be the MVP?
Yes, by default, you'd expect, right? Yeah, that's usually the way history goes. If you're playing with a star AD carry and your lane does well, he's going to win, of course, no matter what you do for him.
Right.
Yeah,
but CoreJJ was so good, he got the MVP, even though he's literally next to an MVP. So like, and there's so many arguments I could easily make in my head at the time because I like hadn't really watched the games. Of like, oh yeah, it's probably just Doublelift carrying him with laning phase. Like, there's no way he's this good,
right?
But then you like look at this guy's consistency and how he knows the limits of like every matchup at level 1 or 2, always finds windows to kill you, which basically makes it like, because he just murders people in scrims. And then when they go on stage, everyone is afraid that he's going to murder them. So he just gets cryo every matchup.
He's got the aura.
Fuck he wants. Right? Yeah, he's got this like aura in game.
Yes.
And then that allows him to like unlock the rest of the map. And it's no coincidence that in 2020, like every draft was about bot prio, because once you have this power point that can consistently get an advantage that is like a matchup problem for the other team they can't deal with. It's like why Rob Gronkowski's was so good for the Patriots, because it's like one guy who was creating a matchup problem, which just literally opens everything else up. Yes. And that's like what Core was and is for Team Liquid. So yeah, he's a machine as well. Like he this year he has been doing 2.5 hours of English class every morning. So he will wake up at 8:30. He will do class from 9 to 9:30, or sorry, from 9 to 11:30. He will stuff down some food. He will join us for the end of our morning meeting. We will do our 5 scrims. We will do the end of day wrap up. He will eat dinner, and then he will get rank 1 in solo queue. And he does that every day.
That's just his calendar, Dom. He goes, right, I've had dinner, get rank 1 in solo queue, then bed, you know. Like.
Yeah, he's like, be a husband's in there, like randomly. Like, how does he have enough time in the day?
So also, like, when I hear people also say, like, hey, you know, these imports are like retired or like paycheck stealing, like, holy shit.
I feel like he's never one that gets that criticism. Like, there's other ones that get that criticism way more than him.
Yeah, no one on Team Liquid for sure. But yeah, he is a machine, and I think his MVPs are like super well deserved.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
he's insane.
Since we've talked about the majority of your team, I mean, the last player that I think we should talk about is Tactical, right? Because this everyone considered Tactical like really insane, one of the best rookie talents that we've had last year in a while, and it seemed like this year he had like a bit of like a sophomore slump. I mean, there was kind of like these inexplicable, like kind of like boneheaded moments that he would have that you really wouldn't expect from him. Yeah, exactly. Like where he's just jumping in, like, and even he's miming it and stuff. Like,
Yeah, of course.
Do you think that it was like a lack of confidence, or why do you think the tactical like looked so much worse from like for the viewers at least than he did previously?
I think it's possibly a little bit of confidence. I think it's maybe a little bit of a sophomore slump. That it would be a term that like more traditional sports fans are used to. I also think it does have a little bit to do with the like approach we took to changing our style, and him also just being still like a young and very talented player. So, and also I think it does also have to do with like snapshots and storylines and the things that stick, because like if we go back and look at lock-in tournament.
Yeah, they were smurfing on everyone.
Yeah, they were like solo killing and double killing every game. And then he has probably like 3 weeks in the middle of the season, especially the TSM game when PoE like killed him back to back on Trist. And then he had a few like really bad looking moments, like one Xayah game where he just like flashed under the turret and died.
Yep.
And then he like kind of anger motivated himself, got back to rank 1 in solo queue, and I thought played really well in playoffs. So he definitely has a little bit of inconsistency in there, but I still think he's just like so insanely talented mechanically. But if you remember what we talked about earlier with the team comp styles that we picked last year versus the team comp styles that we picked this year, that has a very immediate effect on the way an AD carry looks and has to play. So last year, if we have impact on like a tank frontline initiator almost every game, and we're generally playing grouped as much as possible with very like scripted setups around objectives, he really just kind of has to stand and fire. And that's his strength. That's what he was absolutely best at. But this year, we're playing a lot more on side. And you have to make a lot more like split-second macro decisions where you're tracking where every wave is at. And that wasn't his strength. That's not, he's never played that way before. And we have less frontline in general because we're playing Narwinect and GP instead of like Ornn Mordekaiser. So team fights are also different. So yeah, I think that to me explains a lot of the like perceived dip in performance. But I think you can also still look at solo queue, and like right now, him and Core are battling over rank 1 like every single day.
Yep. I just checked that actually. They're like 9 LP away from each other or something.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, he's still super good, but people forget he can't even drink legally. He's 20. Like, dude's super young and under a ton of pressure. So I think he's still doing really well.
Yeah, I mean,
poor guy doesn't even get to go to Europe for lands like back in the day. That's what used to help all the Americans, right? You go over when you're 19, it's legal there, mate. So you finally have a drink. Doesn't even get to do that.
I was gonna go the other way with the joke where it's like, oh, well, you know, I know that on Team Liquid in 2019, allegedly, you know, some of the players were showing up drunk to LCS, so that might have been a benefit.
Oh,
you know?
the Smithy one.
Yeah,
you
know, maybe in a year you're gonna get to see some real shit.
Thing is, though, Dom, even though that story sounds fucked, you have to remember, Smithy was still fire at the time. So to me, I spin it because I like narratives.
Yeah, it's like
I just make it. I make it like he's the drunken master. He's like fucking whatever. Or what was that? I can't remember. Jackie Chan. Yeah, it's like he's rolling in. Like you think, oh, he's fucking drunk, and they just fucking Skarner takes over the game, speaks to IG, and he goes right. Here's all me boys. Let's get to the fucking bar. He goes, you know what? I couldn't handle a game 5, so let's get to the bar right now.
Yep.
I'll make it cool. See,
that's someone who like faded out of the scene like pretty like for
it's weird, isn't it? Dude, he never even made any statements. Like he never even said like, "Oh, I'm off" or anything. Like he just disappeared. Yeah,
it's like 6 months. Like he was on Immortals, and then he like went to the academy team, came back, and then the split ended, and no one heard from him. Because
reminder,
so crazy for a player that won that much to have that follow up.
He does not ever get the true legacy like flowers he deserves. This motherfucker took 3 different organizations, I think it was, to like LCS finals, went international a whole bunch of times. Like he went to, by the way, I don't know if people know this stat, he took 2 different NA orgs to the final of MSI. Yeah. That's no joke in NA.
Would you say
TSM's never even made the playoffs?
Would you say that he took it? Because for me, like,
but he went there then. Okay, how about he went there? That's pretty good.
Was he Tom Bradying it, or was he Peyton Manning it? Like was he carrying?
He was like Aaron Hernandez.
He was one of the luckiest guys of all time. Put it that way. Okay. But no, the point is like, mate, the idea that we just forget about him. Like, yeah, I want to know where he is as well.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. Well, man, this has been a long episode. I know you said you had a hard out at 2 hours.
No, I don't.
No, Thorin said that, actually.
It depends. Do we have another topic or something?
Well, I was going to ask Jatt if there's anything that he wanted to talk about on the podcast.
Have you got something on the agenda you want to get off your chest, or something about shows that you don't like, or something? Have you got anything you want to hit us with?
The NA hate? You want to...
I do think NA hate has gotten a little out of control. Because it's bad, but it's not that bad. And it's like a losing argument every time, because you're saying like, guys, we're not total shit. We're just not that good. Right. But I do think and some of the logic stuff that I talked about earlier in the podcast, like, because something happens the way it happened does not mean someone doesn't understand it. And like, you can straw man this argument and take it to absurdity. Like, what, like, has no one ever shown you how to shoot threes like Steph Curry? Like, why are you not shooting threes better? And I think a lot of the like macro decisions are really difficult to do in the moment and require a ton of reps in different unique situations to get down. So it's like a really long process. So yeah, that's kind of it. It's too perfect of a dream to be like, oh yeah, I wish people just gave him benefit of the doubt, because I understand why it happens. Like, it's such a fun reaction. But yeah, I think I would love it if there was more positivity in the way that we cover this stuff.
Okay.
It's also weird because the other reason I think there's so much NA here, some of it's justified, but one of the reasons I think it's like a really popular topic, though, is because it is popular. What's weird about Americans is, because I don't know if it's like American exceptionalism from like the history of sports, the Olympics and stuff, but because it's expected that, why aren't we the best? When people realize, and by now they've realized in League of Legends, we're not close to the best. In fact, now it's even worse. Even Europe's better than us. When they see that, right, they get mad. They're like, they can't just accept their place and go, right, well, we're the fourth best region, and, you know, it's pretty good. They're not like, you know, like PCS, which is like, hey, it would be cool if we could win a game at Worlds. Maybe we could, like, have a chance to it. No, part of them still feels like, if things went right, shouldn't we be up there? So as a result, if you come along and go, you're right, they're all just trash, these players, and they're lazy, and they're idiots, and they don't understand the game, and you know what, they don't even practice the way the Koreans do, and they're fucking coaches, just half of them are just pros who don't know anything, and they're just getting a check. Like, if you say that, that's music to the ears of someone who wants to believe. Like, it's like copium, isn't it? They want to believe that NA should be way better.
Yeah, was Revenge on this show?
Yes.
On Crackdown? Okay, because I've seen the comment that, like, hey, by the way, coaches don't do everything. Yeah, Revenge said when he was on Academy, his coaches don't do anything. And, like, therefore, no one coaches. Yeah. Like, because one player made one statement about a bad experience, suddenly that transfers to the whole region. Like, unsubscribe. Like, I hate that echo chamber type stuff that happens, because that never happens with positive stuff. Whereas I think the LEC fan base does a great job of perpetuating the positives. Something good happens and it's consistently repeated, which I think is kind of the way it should be happening. And so two things I do want to talk about. I do want to talk a little bit about NA versus EU, but Dom, I want to talk with you about scrims.
Sure.
Because I think you've been critical in the past year in like the volume or the number of scrims that NA is doing. And there's like this like laziness perception. So that's what I want to get into.
Sure, definitely. So, I mean, I guess I'll just restate like my take. So, essentially, I think it was this year that I started talking about this, where I thought that 15 scrims was just simply not enough. If you have 3 days where you're playing like your game days, and then you're treating those as like all like, we only play the game. We don't like, maybe we review on the last day, but we're not like scrimming on those days. We're not practicing. We're not even doing like warm-ups with our academy team or anything. If it is just purely 15 games, 3 days of scrims, 5 games each day, and then a day off, I think it's just not enough. So yeah, I mean, that's essentially like my take on the situation.
So what would you do with the LCS schedule, like to get more scrims?
I mean, so this is the thing. So I'm an advocate for scrimming on stage days. I know people will be like, oh, well, this could like tilt you really hard. Like, what happens if you lose to your academy team in scrims, and then you go into LCS, your confidence shot, and you lose? Like, that could be an issue. But I mean, I'm more on the side of like, that's an option. The other option is just doing more than 5 straight games. Like, I know
put it this way,
when I was a pro, I did something
8. Like, I'll tie it to what Nelson said. Nelson said that some of the teams that even had to travel, because remember in the LPL they like go between cities. He said some of them would scrim on a travel day.
Yep.
So they were going really ham there.
Yeah, and they would normally do like 10 days to 14 days because they would essentially, like, if you had a match coming up, they would scrim, and then like if there was like 3 days in between your match, then like, yeah, then you wouldn't be able to scrim. If there was like more than 3 days, then you would get a day off. So for me, I think that, like, I don't know how it is. Like, I felt like I could personally focus for 8 scrims in a day.
Yeah.
Like, that's maybe like the scrims are like super intense now and you can't do that. But I feel like there needs to be more practice than just 15 games per week going into.
I mean, hell, I'd love it if the public had more information about like the way scrims have evolved as well, because it's changed over the years, right? Like when you were playing, it was blocks of 3 games, right? Twice a day. And then if you triple block, the third block would be 2 games, right?
Yeah, and no day off, because that's what TSM did. And you know, like how you said, everyone always follows the best team. It's like why like everyone always follows when TSM
had, well, they would grind like 30 days in a row.
Yes, so that was like what we would do as well, because we were trying to beat TSM.
Yeah, and especially like at least in like the Kane era of TL, they were triple blocking a lot. So yeah, so when you played, can you just tell people the times that those scrims would happen?
Yeah, like we would go to the office at 10:30, 11 to 12. There'd be like time for a meeting. We wouldn't always have a meeting, but like sometimes we'd have a meeting on what we wanted to do for the day. 12 to 3 would be our first block. Then we'd have 1 hour off from 3 to 4. We'd eat, and then 4 to 7 would be the second block, and then you'd have 1 hour off, and then 8 to 10 would be the third block, and then you'd be done.
And how often did you triple block, and about how many teams were triple blocking?
So we would normally triple block about half the season, and it was like all the good teams would triple block. Like, so like CLG, TSM, us, and C9 would normally triple block, as far as like I understood. Maybe some other teams would do it, but like we kind of had like our own like hierarchy in scrims where it was like we only scrimmed each other, and all like the shit teams would like fend for themselves.
Yeah, and then how much time did that leave for solo queue?
Like, so normally, like, for our team, we played a lot of solo queue. Like, I would normally solo queue from like 11 to like 4 or 5 a.m. and then I would sleep at 5 a.m., wake up at 10, which I don't think is healthy. I'm not advocating for that much practice.
Sure. Do you think that made you a worse player when you played that much solo queue?
No, I actually think that that was like the best I ever played, was like when I was playing that much. Like, I thought that, like, for me, like, I tried the other approach of like being super healthy and like going to the gym and like eating right and sleeping right. And for me, I actually felt like I just played better when I just played more League. That's it. Like, the more League I played, the better I played. That's how I felt.
How long could you maintain that schedule before like cracking?
I don't know. Like, this is like weird because I feel like I was like kind of like an exception, but I felt like I could do it like all the time. Like, I could do it through the entire season. Like, but that's the thing, is like my team never went to MSI or Worlds like in the LCS era. Like,
it never even worked in a sense. Like it did. You were super close to Worlds, but like that didn't let you win the split.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I retired, right? Because I felt like I was doing the most I could and getting and I couldn't get the result, and I was like, okay, well, time to do something else. So I think that like it depends, right? Like, I think that we had a bunch of issues outside of that. I don't think that that was like the reason why we weren't able to perform. I don't think that like it was like individual, like we weren't like playing enough. Like, I think that it was like a bunch of like other systemic issues. Like, I mean, we had like a player literally like lose it like right after the split. It goes to show like the environment that we were in, I think. But
yeah. I mean, I think it's super interesting because not only do you try and schedule what is like most efficient, like there's this, I think there's possibly like conflicting theories of thought about how you actually improve in League, because for instance, NA used to do the schedule you were talking about, where most teams are doing 3 games, break 3 games. I believe China and Korea still do the 2 blocks of 3 and then possible triple block. But when Worlds happened in 2019 in Europe, the European teams had all switched over to this new 5 scrim schedule because they just felt it was so much more efficient. Like, rather than doing 3 games and a break, and then like so often a team is going to be like 20 or 30 minutes late for a block, or they're going to fucking cancel on you, and then you've wasted these 3 hours, and you're playing like 6 games over 8 hours, or you can play 5 games over 5 hours, stay fresh, have more time to watch other leagues, or play more solo queue. Because like my opinion of the way you adapt champions for scrims is like, I hate first timing a champion in scrims, and I want that champion mastered in solo queue. So the players need time to play solo queue. Yeah. So at least, and then Europe had such incredible gains from their scrim change that NA did it as well, right? They're like, okay, we'll scrim 12-5 instead of doing 11-2 and 3-7 because now we've literally created 3 hours in a day and we've only lost 1 game. But in my experience, after 5 games, we've double blocked a few times, and I know COG did a bunch of this last split as well.
Yeah,
when they were
and I actually saw that was one thing that I credited them on. I thought they had a much better team once they started doing that. They were losing every fucking game. They started triple block or they started like double blocking or whatever, and it seemed like their performance definitely like got better towards the season. They were beating everyone. So
yeah, I mean, they also like actually added Broxah and put Pobelter back in the lineup. I'm sure that had something to do with it.
Yeah, but like at the first, I mean, obviously there's time that they spent together. So like the first week that they had like single blocks, they had Pobelter and Broxah. They didn't have the results. Once they started double blocking, results got better, but you could also just attribute that to the fact that they had been playing together for an extra week.
Yeah. And then one other just like data before I really get into this discussion is like in summer 2020, the spring split with exactly the same schedule had room for actually 2x the number of scrims as spring split 2021. If you're going by the schedule, because if teams do 1 off day, which I have tried with TL to do no off days, and I think it's I know it's very personally punishing on me. I lose focus and I don't have a good way of starting out a week. So I think it actually hurts the team overall to not have that like rest/prep/solo queue day. So 1 off day, then you would do 20 scrims across 4 days for 9 weeks, which is 180 scrims. But with the new format, it's 6 weeks with 3 scrim days, which is 15 times 6, which is 90, which is half. So we were trying like a little bit
more in summer, right? Because summer is going to have an extra round robin.
Summer's going to be 9, so you're going to be able to take that 90 and go to 135.
Yep.
Which will only be a slight reduction, and that's if you do the 3 days per week, 5 games, and you have room for double blocks where it's 2 or 3 games in the night. And you're probably going to start your double block around like 7, so you run 7 to 9 or 7 to 10, and then you'll have time for solo queue afterwards. So anyway, what we have done is we have done like Frankenstein scrims or Frankenstein days with stage, like especially Friday. That's like the best day to do it because the game's at night. So you can actually scrim in the afternoon with like final match prep and then start your game. So like we were probably averaging about 20 scrims a week instead of like 15. But then also like solo queue numbers were pretty high. So most of our players averaged like 600 games from January to the end of April. And I think we have Jensen played 1,000. Like Jensen was a workhorse. So
and CoreJJ always flames him for being the lowest elo, right? Outside of maybe Alfari, I think.
I mean, in the past, 2020 was not Jensen's solo queue year. He's been high ranked on like.
Oh, I know he was in a bunch of my games I was doing with him. So yeah, I mean it was rough. No, I'm just kidding.
By the way, if people don't know, that's actually a very significant change because I know that a number of years ago, back when he was in C9, it was actually when he was only a couple of years in.
Yeah,
he was one of the players who didn't believe in solo queue in any. He thought it was so bad. He used to say like, I don't need to, like it's not going to help me. So
Jatt used to not play that much.
I play it every now and then, but I tried to scribble than that. You know,
I didn't actually play that much solo queue.
Yeah, he thought it was bad practice, right?
I needed communication. Like I'm like like half of my game is coordinating with my laners. I can't do it in solo queue. It sucks. So I'd always try and play like ranked 5 solo queue or something. I maybe I flipped. I actually really do value solo queue now for the mechanics and the team fighting.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's like, I don't think that the 15 to 20 number is actually that unreasonable, given the fact that there are 3 stage games per week where extra scrims can be fit. You can fit extra scrims from Tuesday to Thursday. If you really want to grind and go for like short-term gain, I think doing no off days and doing Monday is acceptable. But like, I personally don't think that is going to give you long-term gains. It's going to make players retire, in my opinion. Like, I think maybe you'll burst a little bit, which is like one of the hard things in League with all the patch changes and champion changes. Grinding does have very positive short-term effects. But like over the long term, I'm like really conflicted.
Do you think that that's like a negative? Because for example, like one thing that I was going to ask you is like why is the take to like copy European systems in terms of scrims instead of like copying like Chinese systems of scrims when like China's getting better results, like they've won world championships, and it seems like they do have the player turnover, but it doesn't seem to harm the league. Like the fact that they like players retire or whatever and new players come out, like a lot of the players like you've never even heard before. Like I didn't know who the fuck Bo was until this year. Now I'm just seeing this guy, I'm like, this guy's a fucking freak. So like it seems like they're doing fine with their own thing, even if there is more turnover of players. Like, it seems like the results like are still yielding like a more popular league. I mean, it could just be because China is so like insanely popular in general. Like, there's so many people that play. Like, you're naturally just gonna always have that. But like,
I mean, yeah, maybe I think them having 50 times the number of players that NA is a larger contributor for them finding rookie talents than having better scrim schedules.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like in terms of success. Like, do you think that copying like their like scrim schedule, like do you think that doesn't have as much of a impact on their success as just having like more players, like a better player base?
I think the player base is probably the biggest thing, and I also think that Korea and China have found the most success in general through the really, really high volume approach. My pushback is that the current approach in NA is not exactly low volume. The schedule that I described to you is like you wake up, you do morning meeting, you maybe do a little bit of exercise, you scrim, you eat dinner, and then you play solo queue until midnight. Like the day is full. It's just a matter of how you're. Do
you think all teams are doing that, or do you think that's specific to Team Liquid? Though I guess that's my question.
There's probably some teams that are a little bit lazier or trying to do.
Well, I would assume that most teams would be lazier. Like I would think that like the teams that are like putting out the most work are like TSM, TL, and C9. Like the teams at the top seem like they're the ones that are putting in the most effort. So like that's why it's hard to like do a lot of these types of public criticisms because I'm trying to generalize all 10 NA teams into like one thing. So it might not be specific to TL. Like I think TL is one of the teams that grinds the most. I mean, obviously Tactical, CoreJJ, they're at the top of the ladder all the time. Like I always see them in solo queue. So I mean, I think that they're one of the teams that, I mean, you guys are one of the teams that definitely practice more than other teams. I just think that in general, like, I don't see how we're going to necessarily like overtake China or Korea or even
Let me
Europe.
give you a take. I've got a take for you, right? I'm going to give you a sports analogy. It's going to sound wild. No. So just don't go crazy initially. It's just for the analogy, right?
Okay.
One of the problems that MMA has as a sport is obviously that performance-enhancing drugs can be massively effective in the short term in that sport. Because if you are literally stronger, more endurance, more power, I mean, you are literally just going to be better in the fight. Like it's one of the most, except for baseball where you hit in and all stuff, there's not many sports that it's going to be that extreme in, right? And so as a result, basically, the behind-the-scenes, what I've heard even from industry people in MMA is even if it's not literally like steroids, like there's a million different basically like drug-based things you can try and things you can do. Like, obviously you can do the things that like fucking Lance Armstrong did where you cycle like your blood and you get more oxygen in it. So you practice it. Like there's all these things you can do to enhance your performance, right? But obviously because you're essentially like overclocking your body, it isn't good for you in the long run. It's going to have negative effects. It might even have negative effects like, you know, a year or two down the line. Like you're basically saying like, I want to win now and that's all I care about. And I'm willing to sacrifice maybe even future health, maybe even my life if it's something extreme, because obviously like certain injury, like when you do that, right, the problem is if everyone does that, you almost don't have a choice to say, well, I'm not going to do that because that's silly and that's not a workout, because the arms race will be lost. And so the problem I have is this: because Korea and China have basically an unlimited amount of bodies to throw at this problem of being the best at the game, they essentially, it isn't a choice as to whether you're going to play all these scrims and then solo queue and grind. Like you won't even get to an LPL team if you don't already do that. You probably already do it in the LDL, in semi-pro teams. In Korea, they have those team houses, especially back in the day, where they're not even pro teams. They're semi-pro teams and people sleep on like mattresses and they scrim more than like an LCS team does. But the problem is what you're doing there is it's an arms race again. What you're saying is, I'll just sleep off 4 hours a night like Dom was saying. I remember that's what Mata said in his prime in Samsung. He said, I used to barely sleep and then I would go to bed and look over, and Acorn from Samsung Blue was still playing solo queue. And I was like, wait, but I'm not getting any sleep. Like, and so that guy's just getting not. So the problem with that is you are definitely going to burn out eventually. Like you're not going to play like double it for 10 years, but your gamble is maybe I can win worlds like now. Now listen, the problem for LCS is, first of all, it's not as simple because obviously these aren't people from that culture and you didn't have to do that to get to the top. Like we gave the example before of Phoenix, right? Or you could take Jensen now, right? Jensen doesn't have to do that because the guy who's behind him in Academy isn't doing that either. So it's not like he gets dropped, and he is just way too good relative to the league. There aren't 50 Jensens.
Jensen is grinding.
Yeah.
No, but I'm giving the extreme one though, like the really, really crazy one. That's why I picked him even because like you said, he's playing a lot. But then the other part is this. Not only will they not do that, but because you don't have the unlimited bodies to throw at it, like, let's look at LCS. You needed Doublelift to play 10 years. What the fuck would LCS be if Bjergsen and Doublelift retired 5 years ago? That would have been a dark time, boys. Like, you needed those. So as a result, unfortunately, like, I actually don't think LCS can do that. I know it sounds mad because I don't think culturally it fits. And then more importantly, and this is the real black pill, even if you did it, you wouldn't win Worlds, would you? Like, you don't have the team to win Worlds. So I can understand why the Koreans and the Chinese do it. Like, they could win Worlds. I'm not going to kill myself, semi-literally, to come fourth at Worlds. Yeah. I mean, listen, maybe I would if I was like Kobe Bryant. But, you know, everyone isn't Kobe Bryant. Like, there's a lot of normal people. So what do you think on this? Because to me, it's like, I know it sounds rough because I'm essentially saying you'll never be able to match them. But there's a reason why.
I would have. I would have tried to fight. I would have sacrificed whatever.
You should have gone to an EU team, know what we know now, Dom. You would have been an EU player.
Yeah, how did Dom? And I mean, how did G2 almost win Worlds?
How did they almost win Worlds?
Yeah, they did have a lot of intangibles.
Oh, that's like
and practice wise.
I mean, I feel like that's a question for grabs. I mean, I feel like a lot of it was like
question for perks. Like that's a question for
I mean, I think a lot of it was just like an alternative approach. Like I definitely think is that what you're hinting at here? Is like they had an alternative approach to like the solution because they didn't try to like mimic everyone else. That's how they almost won Worlds is because of like,
Think of the stack, like it's the stacked deck against you that Thorn is talking about.
Yeah.
You have an unlimited number of talents, especially in the LPL. You have I guess an unlimited amount of discipline in Korea or whatever, but also just like an insanely young and hungry player base. The closest analogy to NA, like if we're trying to say like how does North America win Worlds, which is what we're trying to do every day, is like it is definitely not.
Yeah, the easiest way is to get perks. That's what it is.
Who knows? We'll see what happens. And we almost took him down in 5 games, but like I would argue like, that the closest analog to NA is EU and always has been. In terms of speaking the English language and having like relatively close solo queue populations and a little bit of like cross-pollination, and like EU's definitely had NA's number, but you're going to have better luck trying to emulate something that let's say G2 did than trying to emulate something SKT did.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's
I get that point. I definitely get that point. But I mean, I would say that there are like examples in Asia where people have had like ulterior, like different approaches. Like for example, the team that beat G2 was like FPX, right? And FPX had a different style and approach to like how they played the game than pretty much every other team, which is like they had a lot of these like early roams into like 3-man tops, 4-man bot dives. Like they did a lot of like active early game stuff, playing really heavily like for their junglers. So I think that there's like examples of ways to do it. I feel like the way the G2 almost won Worlds was more like stylistically how they played the game rather than their practice approach is what I would say. Like, I think that the fact that they were able to like play the Yasuo bottom and that was like banned so many times throughout like the entire tournament, and they had like all these flex picks, like you could still flex the Syndra bottom, and they had like this weird approach that no one else like had. I think that was more like their strategic approach to the game. I would credit more for their like their chance of almost winning Worlds than like their preparation normal or like their practice schedule, I would say. And
it's possible like that's the type of stuff is you like history is always written by the winners. So like the history of the league has been the winners grind. So it's the assumption that could be true, very well is true, that playing 18 hours a day and going in short bursts and basically that schedule will break 95% of people.
Yes.
But there's actually going to be 5% that doesn't break. Yes. That's going to be Bryant, Jimmy Butler. Like there's tons of stories in sports of players like this. But you also have this huge other pool that you actually have to maximize if you're a region that has fewer players. So you cannot do that schedule. I cannot exist in that schedule. And a lot of very talented, successful NA pros also cannot.
Yeah. So what about instead of like doing it all the time, the same way LPL and LCK does it, you do it kind of like G2, because when you watch G2, they do actually start playing that insane number of games. I mean, they still sleep a healthy number.
They try to peak right for the playoffs.
But they do have that mentality towards like, we're going to practice more and harder and more intensely the farther we go. So when they went to China, like there wasn't like, oh, Wonder's playing like, wow, there wasn't that bullshit going on. I was spectating his games. He had hundreds of games in Chinese solo queue. They're playing the scrims. They're playing a ton of fucking solo queue. They're trying to like, they're going all out in those short bursts. Do you think that that's at least feasible? Like during like
absolutely.
The boot camps?
You should absolutely do stuff like that. Yeah. Like when we go to Worlds, we're not taking days off.
Okay.
Yeah. Although, I mean, we did take 1 day off after playing. But that was it.
Yeah, that's
other than that, we played like 30 days straight, and then we almost made out of groups.
Yeah, no, it's good. So that was the first thing you wanted to address. What was the
what was the second topic? I forget what it was now.
Oh, geez. So we talked about scrims, and then the other one would have been like NA versus EU.
There you go. So that's what I wanted to bring up. So like, so you said that, right? I wanted to say like,
this one is suicide for sure.
I mean, even if it's suicide, I mean, like, you don't have to like be 100% right. I'm like wrong on predictions all the time. Yeah. Not really. I'm actually normally like right all the time. But you know what? We'll just say that I'm wrong all the time just for, you know, to make everyone comfortable on the podcast. Yeah, you know, like why not? But so like, if you think that NA is not that far behind you, what is your prediction for MSI? Like, do you think that, like, because I actually think that NA can beat Mad Lions. Like, I think Mad Lions is not the team that EU wants to be sending.
No.
So I can see, like, NA getting third, but I can never see them getting first or second. I don't think they can make a final.
Here's what I think will happen in MSI. And this is going to be a boring take. So first off, I'm not, like, a huge fan of the new format with, like...
I hate the format.
They're spamming games.
Well, it's too many games that no one gives a fuck about is my problem.
Isn't it 4 round robin best of ones or something?
Yeah, but it's all the groups in like...
One group, because VCS couldn't go, that is 3 teams instead of 4, but they're still playing the same number of games. So one's a quad round robin, the other ones are double round robin.
Okay.
It's, okay. And also that group is just like comically weak because they tiered regions this year into 4 different groups, tier 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's the tier 2 region they took out of the group.
Yep.
So you got a tier 1.
Yeah, guys, just invite TSM, let them play in that slot. They won't get out. It'll be fair. It'll just be another game.
Okay.
I'll find the solution, you know.
We knew Fnatic or TSM was going to get it.
True. Could have been Fnatic.
Barring some type of upset, I think this is what's going to happen. As long as C9 doesn't choke against LLA, who's like the other competitor in their group, they won't make it out. But like it is a short round robin. Like the possibilities of them not even making it is non-zero. And that's not because they're bad. That's just because best of 1 round robins are highly variant. If they make it out, what is supposed to happen, since PCS is the 5th best region that's going, they're playing with the bot lane sub. Like we're going to play like 75 games to get LCK 1 seed, LPL 2 seed, LEC and LCS 3 and 4. Both the Western regions are going to play against the China, Korea in the semifinals. They're both going to lose. And then we're going to get dumb on RNG finals. Yep. Like that's kind of what I think. So we might not even get the NA versus EU showdown because it's unlikely.
But they will play 2 games in like this. Yeah, they'll play 2 games in like like once the top teams get out. So at least you get that.
So my suicidal point about like this is me like just opting into getting flamed because at this point like I think LEC has more fans and definitely more Reddit and Twitter users. So even if I'm correct, like I'll be told that I'm not. Remember before the show, Thorn, when we were talking about titles, right? Yep. And how titles oversimplify the argument to reduce the nuance.
Yes, results-based analysis. Yeah, exactly. Like whoever won did everything right, whoever lost did everything wrong. Like it can't be true, can it? You know.
Exactly. And I think it's indisputable that EU, depending on what you define as titles, has consistently been better. Because
more top placings, everything, yeah, of course.
Benchmarks that have been chosen are like as follows. It is how far did your furthest team advance?
Yes.
And another title that has obviously been picked out is did you make it out of groups?
Yes.
Right. Those are the 2 biggest ones. But within that, I think it undermines how close it has actually been.
Okay.
So, I have stats.
I actually agree with this. This is something that I've talked about on my because I mean this is something that I think goes back. It's like people rewrite history and make it seem like EU has always been better than NA. But there's been like multiple times in history where you can be like, well, at this tournament, like at this point, NA was outperforming, and I feel like that's kind of been lost in like the conversation as well.
Yeah. All right, I got stats. I took every Worlds of Modern Worlds format, which I consider 2014 to 2020.
Okay.
Because we've had the exact same group stage format every year. Like the number of teams that are seeded in has changed a little bit, but
you don't skip to the playoffs. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Korea has made it out of 20 of 21 group stages. They've advanced. By far the best region. Only once did a Korean team.
Who was the team and who was on that team?
It was season 8, wasn't it?
Do you know?
It was CoreJJ.
It's Gen G with CoreJJ. Of course, I just wanted you to say it.
C9 got out. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and then blah, blah, blah. That's why Core came to NA, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's a joke.
And then he retired.
Thought, right, I better be an NA player. Yeah,
we never saw him again.
The old jokes.
Okay. No, I like the stats. Continue with them.
Keep going.
Core, my opinion is Core could play in top LCK team and fit right in.
Yes, definitely. I agree with that.
LPL has made it 16 of 21. 76% of the time. LCK was 95% of the time. LEC has made it 12 of 21, 57%. And this is where the big fucking drop-off is. NA has made 5 of 21, 23%. And most notably, 0 in the past 2 years. But then the drop-off to 5th is actually really big. LMS/PCS has only
almost never.
Only had 1 year.
Flash Wolves.
Where a team made it out of groups, and there were 2. It was Flash Wolves.
Flash Wolves in HQ in season 5.
Yeah.
Every other year, no one. So 2 of 16, 12%. So that's where it is a huge difference, and here's where it's not a big difference. How many games have you won in groups?
Okay.
Korea, 77% group stage win rate. China, 61% group stage win rate. LEC, 51%. NA, 42%.
Does that include tie breaks?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Tie breaks are going to be like 4 games. I mean, it's like 4 or 5 games. I could even cheat it.
That's not that bad then.
Let's just say they're all losses. I'm going to add 5 losses to NA. That would dump them to 40%. And if I added like 5 wins to LEC, that'll make them 52%. Like, it's going to make a difference, but like not a huge one.
Yeah, still.
What was the total gap difference? What, like 7% or so? What was the difference?
So it's without tiebreakers, it's 8%. With tiebreakers, it's probably like 10 or 12.
Okay.
And then LMS is 29%. So a much bigger gap between NA LMS than there is against EU NA.
So it's more format related, basically.
There's actually the biggest gap is actually LCK to LPL.
Nelson had something to add there. Does that include the games that like don't matter, like games that are like troll games? Because like, for example, there's ones that could go in NA's favor, like when they lost to Pain Gaming in season 5, where it's like they're already eliminated.
This is all group stage games. Yeah, now that I've done this and your podcast has a lot of viewership, like someone could probably make a Reddit thread and say how I'm like twisting the facts, but like go for the research. I'd love to see more nuance. I want to see like NA versus EU win rates in group stage, right? Because I actually think that's pretty close too. And then like even MSI groups, like we talk about MSI. Do you know NA has a higher group stage win rate than EU in MSI history?
It makes sense because like G2 shit the bed that one time.
They went on vacation.
There's been a few embarrassing ones for you.
CLG was 7-3, G2 was 2-8. Next year, TSM was 4-6, G2 was 4-6. But like tiebreakers and seeding and stuff made it so TSM didn't make it a group stage. The only thing and then next year, TL 4-6, Fnatic 4-6, Fnatic won the tiebreaker. Even the year G2 won MSI, G2 5-5, TL 4-6. Literally, NA went 4-6 3 years in a row. But the year they make it out of groups is not because they did anything different, but because Flash Wolves was 3-7 instead of 7-3, right? So like NA has been really consistent at the same 4th place level for all this time, and EU has, I think, made a jump, and they've been extraordinary in clutch situations, specifically G2, winning either tiebreakers or very close series, and that has made the disparity seem larger than it is. That's my only kind of boring point that hopefully doesn't get
Put it this way, I'll tag on to that and make another statement that people might cry about, but if you just think about it, it's totally true. Even the players will tell you. G2 was overrated in this context. Everyone remembers G2's peaks. They remember when they're amazing and they beat SKT. They don't remember every group stage. They fuck around. Half the time, they always drop. They don't just drop games. Peak G2. Like, remember the G2 that won MSI and was losing all the games to Fongbu Buffalo? Like, there's no Korean team fucking wins Worlds and then like, I was losing to Pain Gaming. It doesn't happen. I agree. Like, I even think, considering G2 was already the outlier.
You did have Broxah lose to ANX in season 6, but you know,
they still came first in the group, Dom.
Yeah. True.
And G2 always comes fucking second in their groups, pretty much. Like, so if they're already the outlier super team with all the best players ever, like, you remove them from the equation, it actually isn't that far.
They lost to Team Liquid last year, for fuck's sakes. No, I'm just kidding. I just knew that.
That's true, though.
They did. We were, if we didn't lose to the LMS, who's the 5th best region, like maybe we force a tiebreaker in that.
Yeah. But it's like he said, think of the 2 factors. It's not like how did you do in the group? What's the qualitative analysis of how you play? It's how did your best team do? So I told everyone on shows for the last 2 years, G2 boosted LEC. Take them out of the equation, and suddenly Fnatic just making round of 8 each time wouldn't be that cool. You wouldn't be bragging like, NA's trash. We made the round of 8 and then got knocked out immediately. Like, no one would be bragging, would they?
Fnatic made finals in 2018, which is the big one, but like, it's also the year Cloud9 made semis.
Yeah.
And like G2 and MSI, that's also the year Team Liquid made it to the finals.
Exactly. Yes. And this is what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to bring up these 2 series because I feel like this has had a huge impact on like the idea of NA versus EU is both times that it gets kind of close and we get to see like NA versus EU in a close matchup or like a matchup that should be hyped. it's like
It's
NA
smashed.
just gets fucking destroyed every single time. So I think that has like a huge contributing factor into the overall perception.
Well, there's another thing that goes into what we
leagues.
were saying before as well. The other classic thing that sports fans do is, how could you possibly be better than the person that beats you in the head-to-head? They can never understand that. Whereas obviously it's how you are against the field. So in this case, what we're saying is head-to-head, yes, in some very big, more memorable matches, EU got smashed. But that doesn't mean that against the whole, like for example, against like Koreans LPL, based on the group stage stuff Jatt's saying, it's not that, it's the 8% difference.
Yeah, and also the amplification of the moments is much higher just based on the nature of the competitive fan bases.
Yes.
So the most embarrassing North American losses have been at the hands of EU. the Fnatic just stomping C9 into the ground in semifinals, and then the fastest international best of 5, like that got pushed by the broadcast team and by the fans for a year. Yet G2 losing to Damwon, and the game 4 is just them collapsing and losing post 20 minutes to a dancing Rift Herald. I've probably heard that when they made the final call, and then no one dare spoke of it again.
Yep. Yeah, it's like depression for everyone. Like we can't even talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. But imagine that was Team Liquid or TSM doing that. Holy shit, they would like that. That would be repeated for a year. Yeah. So it's just the way that I don't think it's necessarily anyone's fault, but it's just because we're on a 3-hour podcast. Like I wanted to talk.
Well, this is the longest episode we've ever had of the Crackdown. By the way, there's never been one that touched. But I mean, this is like the whole point. I mean, I've enjoyed all the conversations that we got into. I mean, I think there's a lot of different things that we've hit here. But yeah, I mean, I definitely see where you're coming from. I just think that like I think it's just really hard to like compare them given like what we just talked about, like just like the important moments. The important moments I feel like goes so heavily towards EU. Like if you tried to like rationalize and use facts and like numbers, it feels like bigger than an 8% gap, I guess is what I would say. But yeah. Man, that was a long podcast. I think that concludes it. This is the longest it's ever been.
I mean, I hadn't been on a podcast in like a year. Maybe I had just too much built up. Maybe I had to just talk. I'm addicted.
Yeah, I mean, I love talking about League of Legends. I talk about League for a living, right? So I think that I could do any of these. Like it doesn't feel like it was a long one. But yeah, I definitely appreciate you being here. One of the most insightful guests, and I think that you have just like so much perspective, being like wearing so many different hats along your career, that it makes for like a bunch of like. I mean, you remember everything too. You also have a mind like kind of like Thorin and I, where you remember like all of history, kind of. So I think that obviously adds to the level of things we can talk to. But yeah, appreciate you being here. One of the best guests we've ever had. Longest episode we've ever had. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it here, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks for being here, Jatt.
Thanks.